To walk through London is to participate in a grand, ongoing conversation between the centuries. It is a city that never fully erases its past, but rather builds directly upon it, layer by layer, until the modern skyline becomes merely the latest entry in a long and crowded diary. This is a place that began as a muddy Roman outpost on the edge of a vast empire and grew into a global metropolis that contains, in its DNA, the history of the world itself. Across the following chapters, we will peel back these layers through 100 distinct facts that define the city's character. We will descend into the shadow city beneath the pavement, a realm of Roman aqueducts, medieval passages, and Cold War bunkers, and trace the evolution of the Thames, a tidal artery that has carried everything from Roman wine to global trade. We will see how London is a city of movement, from the world's oldest underground railway to the iconic red buses, and how it is equally a city of quiet intervals, where protected views of St. Paul's Cathedral remain sacrosanct amidst the glass towers. Yet, London is not merely a subject to be studied, it is a landscape to be navigated. To assist in this transition from observer to participant, we have woven 20 essential tips for the modern visitor into our narrative. These are the quiet rules of the road, from the silent etiquette of the escalator to the art of grouping the city's villages, designed to help you move through the labyrinth with the grace of a local. This is not just a history of a place, but a biography of an eccentric, resilient, and ever-changing character named London. Whether through its engineering triumphs, its wartime survival, or its peculiar rituals, London reveals itself as a city that honors its ancestors while restlessly inventing its future. So, mind the gap as we step across the threshold of time. From the stone foundations of Londinium to the glass peaks of the modern skyline, this is the story of a city that contains multitudes, and invites you to find your own story within them. Foundations beneath the clay. The Thames moves slowly through London in winter, its surface the color of tarnished pewter beneath a sky that seems to press down upon the city like a hand. On mornings when mist rises from the water, you might stand on the embankment and imagine, if you narrow your eyes just so, that you can see through the accumulated centuries to something older, simpler, more essential. The river has always been here, of course, patient and persistent, watching as settlements rose and fell along its banks like tides. But London, the London that would become a great city, began not with a whisper but with a declaration. In the year 43 AD, Roman legions under Emperor Claudius crossed the Channel and pushed inland, and where they found a suitable crossing point on this tidal river, they planted something permanent. They called it Londinium. The site was chosen with characteristic Roman pragmatism. Here, the Thames narrowed sufficiently for a bridge, the first London Bridge, though not the one that would later bear that name in song and story. Here, the river was still tidal enough to allow ships from the continent to navigate upstream, yet far enough inland to offer some protection from coastal raiders. On the north bank, two modest hills rose from the floodplain, providing dry ground and a commanding view. To Roman engineers, men who thought in terms of centuries and empires, it must have seemed obvious. They set to work. If you could have watched from above during those early years, you would have seen the organized chaos of Roman construction. Legionaries doubled as builders, their military precision translated into straight lines and right angles carved into the landscape. Within 2 decades of their arrival, Londinium had transformed from a scattering of native huts into something recognizable as a Roman town. There was a forum, a basilica, temples, bathhouses, and amphitheater. There were warehouses lining the waterfront where goods from across the empire, wine from Gaul, olive oil from Hispania, grain from Egypt, were unloaded and distributed throughout Britannia. But it was beneath the surface, literally and metaphorically, where Roman Londinium would leave its most enduring mark. The Romans understood something that many civilizations before them had not quite grasped, that cities are as much about what lies beneath as what rises above. Water had to be brought in. Waste had to be carried away. Foundations had to be laid deep and true. A city, to the Roman mind, was a machine for living, and like any machine, it required proper engineering. They began with the streets. Not the meandering paths that follow natural contours and ancient rights of way, but proper streets, straight, paved, and purposeful. The main road ran east to west, parallel to the river, connecting the bridge to the western gate. Another ran north from the bridge, climbing the hill toward what would later become the site of the medieval city. These weren't mere dirt tracks. They were constructed in layers, large stones at the bottom for drainage and stability, then gravel, then carefully fitted paving stones on top. After 2,000 years, after countless reconstructions and renovations, many of London's streets still follow those original Roman lines. Walk along Cheapside or Lombard Street today, and you're tracing routes first laid down by men in sandals and togas who spoke Latin and worshipped Jupiter. But the Romans dug deeper still. Every city needs water, and Londinium was no exception. The Thames was there, of course, but river water, especially tidal river water subject to the backwash of a busy port, was not suitable for drinking. So the Romans did what Romans did: they built aqueducts. These weren't the soaring architectural marvels you might see in Spain or southern France. Britain didn't require such grand structures. Instead, Roman engineers located springs in the hills north of the city and constructed channels, some above ground, some below, to carry fresh water into Londinium. Clay pipes, lead pipes in the wealthier quarters, and carefully graded channels ensured a steady supply of clean water to public fountains, bathhouses, and private homes. Some of these channels still exist, buried beneath the modern city, their Roman brickwork still sound after 2 millennia. During excavations for the underground or new building foundations, workers occasionally break through into these ancient waterways, finding them dry now, or sometimes still carrying groundwater along routes determined before England was England. And where water comes in, waste must go out. The Roman approach to sewage was, for its time, remarkably sophisticated. They understood disease, not in the way modern medicine understands it, but in the practical sense that waste and sickness were connected. So beneath the streets of Londinium, they constructed sewers, stone-lined channels that carried rainwater and human waste down toward the Thames. These weren't simple ditches. They were properly engineered conduits with regular gradients, built to last. Some were large enough for a person to walk through upright, which was intentional. They needed to be maintained, and maintenance required access. In the deeper parts of the city, particularly around Cornhill and Threadneedle Street where modern London's financial district now stands, these Roman sewers still form part of London's drainage system. They've been modified, certainly, connected to later medieval and Victorian infrastructure, but the fundamental structure remains Roman. When Joseph Bazalgette designed London's great sewer system in the 19th century, he had to account for these ancient passages, incorporating them into his plans or working around them. The Romans had built too well to simply demolish and replace. It's a strange thing to consider, standing in modern London with its glass towers and electric lights, that beneath your feet runs a continuous thread of infrastructure stretching back 2,000 years. The city has burned, been rebuilt, expanded beyond recognition, endured plague and bombing and the slow accumulation of centuries, yet those Roman foundations persist. They persist not through luck but through design, through the Roman conviction that what was worth building to last. The city walls came later, after Londinium had proven its worth and its vulnerability. In 60 AD, barely 17 years after the Roman arrival, Boudicca's rebellion had swept through southern Britain like a cleansing fire. Londinium, prosperous and undefended, was destroyed. The archaeological record speaks plainly. A layer of burnt debris, thick with ash and charred timber, marks that catastrophe. The city that rose from those ashes was more cautious. By the end of the 2nd century, Londinium was surrounded by walls, massive walls, 3 miles in circuit, enclosing an area of roughly 330 acres. They were built in the Roman fashion, a concrete core faced with Kentish ragstone, standing 20 feet high and 8 feet thick at the base. Every 80 yards or so, a tower projected outward, providing defensive positions and breaking up the monotony of the wall. There were gates at the major roads, Ludgate to the west, Newgate to the northwest, Bishopsgate to the north, Aldgate to the east. These walls would define London for more than 1,000 years. Long after the Romans departed and their empire crumbled, the walls remained, maintained and extended by Saxon, Norman, and medieval builders. They determined where the city ended and the countryside began. They shape the psychology of Londoners, creating a sense of inside and outside, of urban and rural, of safety and threat. Even today, long after the walls themselves have mostly vanished, torn down for their stone or simply absorbed into later buildings, their circuit is remembered. The modern city of London, that peculiar square mile with its own government and traditions, occupies almost exactly the same area as walled Roman Londinium. Walk through the city now, and you can still find fragments. Behind the Tower Hill underpass, a substantial section stands, its Roman stonework clearly visible in the lower courses, medieval additions above. In the Barbican, another stretch survives, incongruous among the 20th century tower blocks. Near the Museum of London, you can see where the wall ran, trace its course with your finger on a map, imagine the sentries who once walked its circuit, looking out at forests and marshes where now there are streets and shops and the relentless churn of London life. But perhaps the most profound legacy of Roman London isn't what you can see but what you can't. It's the principle they established, that a city requires infrastructure, planning, and long-term thinking. When medieval builders wanted to construct London Bridge in stone, they looked to Roman techniques. When Victorian engineers needed to solve London's water crisis, they studied Roman aqueducts. When modern developers dig foundations for new skyscrapers, they must account for Roman walls, Roman roads, Roman sewers that have been carrying away rainwater since before the Anglo-Saxons arrived in Britain. There's a moment, late on a winter afternoon when the light is failing and the city seems to pause between day and night, when you might feel it, the weight of all that history, the accumulated presence of all those earlier Londons layered one upon another like sedimentary rock. Stand on London Bridge at such a moment, watching the Thames flow beneath you just as it flowed beneath the first Roman bridge, and you're standing on a site that has been significant for 2,000 years. The bridge is new, of course. The current one dates only to 1973, but the principle, the location, the reason for being here at all, those are Roman. They didn't know they were founding what would become one of the world's great cities. To them, Londinium was simply another provincial capital, important but not exceptional, useful but not central to their empire. They couldn't have imagined the London that would eventually grow from their foundations, couldn't have conceived of a city of 9 million people, of underground trains running through tunnels they helped inspire, of a financial center that would influence the global economy, of a metropolis that would spread for mile after mile in every direction. But they built as though they did know. They built with the assumption that what they were creating would matter, would endure, would serve purposes they couldn't anticipate. That's the Roman gift to London, not just walls and sewers and straight roads, but an idea of permanence, a belief that infrastructure and planning and careful engineering can create something that outlasts empires. The rain has returned, as it so often does in London, soft and persistent. It falls on the Thames, on the streets, on the remnants of Roman walls. Some of it drains away through Roman sewers, flowing along channels cut by men who have been dust for 17 centuries, making its way to the river through a system that still functions, still serves, still carries away the detritus of urban life. The city has grown, changed, been transformed beyond recognition. But scratch the surface, dig down through the layers of London life, and there it is, Londinium, patient and enduring, the foundation upon which everything else was built. The Romans came, stayed for 3.5 centuries, and left. But what they created, the principle they established, that this crossing point on the Thames was worthy of a great city, that has never left. It persists in the street plan, in the hidden waterways, in the shape of the old city, in the very bones of London. And on quiet mornings when mist rises from the Thames, if you know where to look and how to see, you can still glimpse it, the ghost of Londinium, the Roman city that made London possible, still present beneath the modern metropolis, still shaping the city that rises above it, still whispering its long story to anyone willing to listen. The foundations remain. They always will. The city within a city. There is a boundary in London that most people cross without noticing. No wall marks it anymore, no gate or checkpoint interrupts your passage. Yet it exists as surely as any border between nations, invisible but absolute, separating the city of London, that ancient square mile with its own laws, its own government, its own peculiar character, from the sprawling metropolis that has grown up around it like a forest around a standing stone. Stand at Temple Bar, where Fleet Street becomes the Strand, and you're standing on this threshold. A small monument marks the spot now, replacing the medieval gate that once controlled passage between the city and Westminster. When the monarch wishes to enter the city, even today, they must pause here and request permission from the Lord Mayor. It's ceremonial, of course, a piece of historical theatre performed for tourists and tradition. But like many ceremonies in London, it commemorates something that was once deadly serious, the question of who holds power and where. London has always been two cities, or perhaps three if you count the Westminster that grew up around the Royal Palace and Abbey. But it's the city, capital C always, that demands our attention first, because the city remembers. It remembers privileges granted by William the Conqueror, who found it easier to confirm the city's ancient rights than to conquer it. It remembers charters and freedoms accumulated over centuries, negotiated, purchased, defended. It remembers being powerful when kings were poor, being essential when monarchs were expendable. The Lord Mayor of London, not to be confused with the Mayor of London, an entirely different and much newer position, is elected each year by the city's livery companies, those medieval guilds of merchants and craftsmen that still exist, still meet, still exercise their ancient privileges. The installation ceremony, Michaelmas in the Guildhall, is a study in continuity. The Common Hall assembles, the liverymen vote, and a new Lord Mayor is chosen according to procedures that date back to the 12th century. Then in November, comes the Lord Mayor's show, when the newly installed mayor processes through the city in a gilded coach built in 1757, accompanied by floats and performers and the kind of pageantry that makes London simultaneously ridiculous and magnificent. Watch the procession on a cold November morning, and you might smile at the anachronism of it all: the scarlet robes, the golden chains, the coach that looks like it belongs in a fairy tale. But pay attention to the route. It runs from the Guildhall to the Royal Courts of Justice, where the new Lord Mayor swears loyalty to the Crown. Not obedience, mind you. Loyalty. The distinction matters. The city has always insisted that it stands beside the monarch, not beneath. It's a relationship of mutual respect between powers, not submission of subject to ruler. This isn't mere historical curiosity. The City of London Corporation, as it's formally known, governs the square mile with powers that predate Parliament. It maintains its own police force, distinct from the Metropolitan Police that serves the rest of London. It elects its own government through a Byzantine system that gives votes to both residents and businesses. It holds assets worth billions, properties, markets, infrastructure, that have been accumulated over centuries. And crucially, it has never been absorbed into the Greater London that grew up around it. When London's government was reorganised in 1965, creating the Greater London Council, the city simply opted out. It always opts out. That's rather the point. Walk through the city on a weekday morning, and you'll see why it matters. The streets fill before dawn with people in suits, carrying briefcases or staring at phones, streaming toward office towers where billions of pounds change hands every hour. This square mile, this ancient core of London, is one of the world's two great financial centres, rivaled only by New York. Banks cluster here, insurance companies, law firms, trading floors where futures and currencies and commodities flow through fiber optic cables at the speed of light. The old merchant city, the place where Romans unloaded ships and medieval traders haggled over wool and spices, has become something the Romans couldn't have imagined: a node in a global financial network, a place where decisions made in glass towers ripple out to affect markets on every continent. And yet, walk those same streets on a Sunday, and the city empties. The resident population of the square mile is barely 8,000 people. During the week, 500,000 commute into work, then leave. The restaurants close, the pubs quiet down, and you can walk down streets that during business hours are impassable rivers of humanity. It's a city that breathes in during the week and exhales on weekends, a place devoted not to living but to commerce, to the ancient art of making money. The Romans would have understood that, at least. They founded Londinium as a trading post, after all. But they might have been puzzled by what happened to the east of the city, in an area that was marshland in their time. Canary Wharf rises from what was once the West India docks, where ships from the Caribbean unloaded sugar and rum and all the profitable products of empire. The docks closed in the 1980s, made obsolete by containerization and too far from the sea for modern shipping. For a time, the area decayed, warehouses falling into ruin, water in the docks becoming stagnant. Then came the transformation. The old dock became a construction site, and towers began to rise, One Canada Square first, its pyramid top visible from across London, then more and more, until a second financial district had emerged, all glass and steel and aggressive modernity. Canary Wharf doesn't pretend to history or ceremony. It's purely functional, built for the 21st century, connected to the rest of London by the Jubilee Line extension and the Docklands Light Railway. Banks that might have crowded into the square mile found room to expand here. American firms, in particular, comfortable with the aesthetic of corporate modernism, made Canary Wharf their London home. Stand on the riverside walk at Canary Wharf at dusk, watching lights come on in tower after tower, and you're seeing the same impulse that built Londinium, the desire to trade, to profit, to be at the center of exchanges. The tools have changed, the scale has changed, but the fundamental purpose remains. London is where it is because it's useful for commerce. Everything else follows from that. But commerce isn't governance, and the city, for all its power, isn't where Britain is ruled. For that, you must travel west, 2 miles along the Thames to Westminster. Westminster grew up differently. Where the city was merchants and money, Westminster was prayer and power. Edward the Confessor built his abbey here in the 11th century, and a palace beside it. William the Conqueror was crowned in the abbey, and so has every English monarch since. Parliament emerged from the King's Court, meeting first in Westminster Hall, that magnificent space with its hammer-beam roof, built in 1097, still standing, and gradually establishing itself as a separate power, a check on royal authority. The Palace of Westminster burned in 1834, a fire so spectacular that crowds gathered on the south bank to watch it blaze. What rose in its place, designed by Charles Barry and Augustus Pugin, is the building the world now recognizes as London: Gothic Revival spires, Big Ben tolling the hours, the Houses of Parliament where democracy, British style, conducts its complicated business. Inside, the Commons and the Lords debate and vote, the government of the day trying to implement its agenda while the opposition opposes, the whole thing conducted according to traditions and procedures that baffle outsiders and delight parliamentarians. But Westminster is more than Parliament. Whitehall, the broad street running south from Trafalgar Square, is where government actually happens. The ministries cluster here: the Treasury, the Foreign Office, the Ministry of Defense. Behind their neoclassical facades, civil servants implement policy, draft legislation, advise ministers, and keep the machinery of state running regardless of which party holds power. It's less dramatic than Parliament, less visible, but in many ways more important. Parliament decides, Whitehall executes. And beneath Whitehall, beneath the ordinary streets where tourists photograph guards and monuments, lies another London entirely. During the Second World War, when bombs fell nightly on the city, the government went underground. The Cabinet War Rooms, now preserved as a museum, show where Churchill and his inner circle directed Britain's war effort from rooms protected by increasingly thick layers of concrete. But the tunnels went deeper and wider than that. A whole network was constructed, connecting government buildings, providing shelter for essential personnel, ensuring that even if the surface was destroyed, the state could continue to function. These tunnels were never fully decommissioned. During the Cold War, they were expanded, updated with better ventilation and communication equipment, prepared for a nuclear war that mercifully never came. The government doesn't discuss them much. Their exact extent and current status remain classified, but occasional glimpses emerge. Tunnel entrances tucked behind anonymous doors. Stories from construction workers who broke through into unexpected passages. Rumors of telephone exchanges, emergency broadcasting facilities, places where key personnel could shelter while the world above ended. It's an unsettling thought, that beneath the monuments and ministries lies this shadow government, this prepared contingency for catastrophe. But it's very London, in a way, practical, secretive, determined to endure. The Romans built sewers and aqueducts to last millennia. The modern British state builds bunkers and tunnels to outlast nuclear war. Different threats, same impulse toward permanence. A mile southwest from Westminster, across St. James's Park, sits Buckingham Palace. It's a relatively new addition to London's landscape of power, at least by London standards. The first Buckingham House was built in 1703, a private residence for the Duke of Buckingham. George III bought it in 1761 as a comfortable home away from the formal rigmarole of St. James's Palace. But it was Victoria who made it the official royal residence, expanding it, adding the famous facade, establishing it as the symbol of monarchy that it remains today. The palace serves multiple functions. It's a working building, housing offices for the royal household, hosting state banquets and receptions, providing a stage for the theatre of monarchy. It's also deeply symbolic. The changing of the guard draws crowds daily, the royal standard flying from the roof signals the monarch's presence, and the balcony serves as a focal point for national celebration or mourning. When something happens that requires a national response, crowds gather at the palace gates, leaving flowers or waving flags, using the building as a proxy for their feelings about crown and country. But the palace is also simply a house. Someone lives there, or at least maintains it as their primary residence. There are private apartments, personal spaces, places where the business of being monarch, and the rather different business of being human, can be conducted away from public view. It's a strange duality, simultaneously a public monument and a private home, constantly navigating the boundary between the two. This, then, is how power distributes itself across London. The city handles money, maintaining its ancient independence and modern relevance. Westminster handles governance, Parliament making laws while ministries implement them. The palace handles continuity, providing a focus for loyalty and tradition that transcends politics. And beneath it all, literally and figuratively, run the hidden channels, the tunnels and bunkers, the informal networks, the thousand small ways power actually flows regardless of org charts and official hierarchies. Stand on Westminster Bridge at night, looking east toward the city, and you can see it all laid out before you. The Palace of Westminster, floodlit and golden, seat of democracy. The city beyond, its towers blazing with light, counting the world's money. And between them, invisible but essential, the connections, roads and railways and fiber optic cables and older, deeper passages that no map fully records. Different types of power, different sources of authority, all coexisting in this improbable city that grew from Roman pragmatism into something no one could have planned. The train passes overhead, crossing the Thames toward Waterloo. Below, the river flows as it always has, indifferent to the institutions that line its banks. The city within a city maintains its privileges. Westminster debates and decides. The palace endures. And London, that vast creature that encompasses all of them and sprawls for miles beyond, simply continues, trading, governing, ceremonializing, keeping its secrets, conducting its complicated business of being simultaneously ancient and modern, powerful and peculiar, a city where the past refuses to stay buried and the future insists on arriving regardless. The Lord Mayor's coach will roll again next November, as it has for centuries. Parliament will meet, debate, vote. The palace will host its ceremonies. And beneath Whitehall, in passages that don't officially exist, lights will burn in rooms prepared for emergencies that may never come. That's London, layered, complex, impossible to fully understand, but unmistakably itself, forever and always. The Shadow City. London exists twice. Once above ground, where sunlight touches stone and rain falls on pavements, where buses rumble past and people hurry between appointments, their faces turned upward towards sky and architecture. And once below, in a mirror city of tunnels and chambers, passages and vaults, where darkness is broken only by artificial light and the air smells of damp earth and century-old brick. Most Londoners know about the underground, of course. They take it daily, descending escalators into that peculiar world of tile and turbulence, standing on platforms while trains roar out of tunnels like dragons from their lairs. But the tube is only the most visible layer of subterranean London, the public face of a hidden realm that goes much deeper and much stranger than the average commuter imagines. Begin where London began, with the Romans. Their aqueducts and sewers still thread beneath the city, as we've already discovered. But they dug other passages too, chambers for storage, tunnels connecting important buildings, hypocausts beneath bathhouses where heated air circulated through brick channels. Most have collapsed over the centuries, filled in or built over or simply lost. But some remain, waiting in the darkness for someone to stumble upon them during construction work or archaeological exploration. A basement is excavated for a new development, and suddenly the builders break through into Roman brickwork, a passage leading off into shadows, its destination unknown. The medieval city added its own layers. Westminster Abbey, that great church where kings are crowned, conceals a network of passages beneath its floors. Monk runs, they're called, though whether medieval monks actually used them much is debatable. More likely they were practical, ways to move between different parts of the abbey complex without going outside in winter, routes for carrying supplies or removing refuse, escape routes perhaps in times of trouble. They're still there, beneath the feet of tourists photographing tombs and monuments, dark passages that smell of old stone and centuries. But London's real commitment to living underground, to creating not just cellars and crypts but actual infrastructure beneath the surface, began in earnest in the 19th century. The Thames Tunnel, opened in 1843, wasn't the first tunnel under a river, but it was the first to be successfully completed using the tunneling shield invented by Mark Isambard Brunel. It ran from Rotherhithe to Wapping beneath the Thames, a marvel of Victorian engineering that drew crowds who paid a penny to descend the grand staircase and walk beneath the river, marveling that water could be flowing overhead while they strolled in perfect safety below. The tunnel was meant for horse-drawn carriages, but the ramps were never built. Instead, it became a pedestrian walkway, and later, rather wonderfully, was incorporated into the London Underground. Today, overground trains run through Brunel's tunnel, and passengers sitting in carriages rarely realize they're passing through a structure that predates their great-grandparents, that was revolutionary when Victoria was still a young queen. The Underground itself, of course, transformed subterranean London. The Metropolitan Railway, opened in 1863, was the world's first underground passenger railway, running from Paddington to Farringdon through tunnels just below the surface, built by the cut-and-cover method: dig a trench, build the tunnel, cover it back up. The trains were hauled by steam locomotives, which tells you something about the Victorian tolerance for discomfort. Imagine descending into a tunnel full of smoke and steam, the air thick and choking, all to save time on your journey across London. Deep-level tubes came later, bored through the clay with tunneling shields, narrow and cramped but mercifully smoke-free once electric locomotives replaced steam. The network grew, expanded, became the system Londoners now depend on. But as it grew, it also created orphans, stations that were opened, used for a time, then closed when routes changed or demand shifted. Aldwych Station on the Strand closed in 1994 after spending decades as a branch line terminus serving so few passengers it only opened during peak hours. The station still exists, perfectly preserved, its advertising posters from the 40s and 50s still on the walls, its tunnels occasionally used for filming when a director needs a convincingly authentic underground setting. You can take tours sometimes, descending into this time capsule, standing on platforms where commuters once waited for trains that no longer come. Down Street Station, between Hyde Park Corner and Green Park, closed even earlier, in 1932. It lay forgotten until the Second World War, when it was converted into the Railway Executive Committee's emergency headquarters. Churchill held war cabinet meetings there. It became a command center, a place where the railway system, vital for moving troops and supplies, could be coordinated even during the heaviest bombing. The station had bedrooms, offices, a telephone exchange, all hidden behind the locked doors of what appeared to be an abandoned underground station. The war, in fact, revealed just how much London existed underground. When the Blitz began and bombs started falling nightly, Londoners descended en masse into the tube. Officially, the government initially discouraged this. The stations weren't designed as shelters, they worried about panic and disorder. But people came anyway, buying the cheapest ticket and simply refusing to leave, bedding down on platforms while trains continued to run, creating an entire underground city of refugees from the war above. The government eventually accepted the inevitable and began providing amenities: bunks, toilets, canteens. Some stations became officially designated shelters. And in an impressive feat of emergency engineering, deep-level shelters were built. Massive bunkers far below existing tube lines, designed to hold thousands of people in relative safety. Clapham South was one of these, 2 parallel tunnels each long enough to hold 8,000 people, with bunks, medical facilities, and all the infrastructure needed to keep a population alive underground for extended periods. Most of these deep shelters were barely used. By the time they were completed, the worst of the Blitz was over. But they remained, and after the war, they found other uses. Clapham South became temporary housing for immigrants arriving on the Empire Windrush in 1948. Others became storage facilities, emergency supplies cached against future disasters. One was briefly considered as a nightclub, though that plan thankfully failed. Not all of London's underground world was about shelter or transport. The Post Office Railway, affectionately known as Mail Rail, ran beneath the streets from 1927 to 2003, carrying mail between sorting offices and railway stations in driverless trains through narrow tunnels. At its peak, it moved 4 million letters a day, a hidden postal artery flowing beneath the city. It closed when newer technology and changing mail volumes made it obsolete, but the tunnels remain. You can tour them now, riding in tiny trains through passages where millions of letters once traveled, a peculiar piece of industrial archaeology. The Kingsway tram subway told a different story, of transport innovation that never quite worked. Opened in 1906, it was meant to connect North and South London tram networks through a tunnel beneath Holborn. Trams would descend into the tunnel at one end and emerge at the other, bypassing the congested streets above. It was ingenious in theory, but trams were already becoming obsolete, and the subway never saw the use its builders imagined. Parts were converted into an air raid shelter during the war, and later, more interestingly, into the Kingsway Telephone Exchange, a communications hub buried safely underground, vital for both civil and military telecommunications. The Special Operations Executive, the wartime organization that trained spies and coordinated resistance movements in occupied Europe, used tunnels connected to this exchange. Agents would be briefed and debriefed in rooms far below the ordinary world, their dangerous work coordinated from chambers that officially didn't exist. The Cold War added another layer of secrecy to underground London. Burlington, a massive bunker complex beneath Corsham in Wiltshire, was connected by tunnel to the capital and designated as the emergency government headquarters in case of nuclear attack. Central government would retreat there, along with the BBC, move to Reading, and continue governing what remained of Britain from underground cities equipped to survive for months. The Whitehall tunnels we mentioned earlier connected to this network, creating a shadow government ready to activate the moment the bombs fell. They never did, of course. The Cold War stayed cold, the bunkers remained empty, and gradually, as the Soviet Union collapsed and the threat receded, these facilities became embarrassments rather than essentials. Some have been decommissioned, others maintained at minimal levels, just in case. You can tour Burlington now, walk through rooms where the Prime Minister would have slept, see the map rooms where the remains of Britain would have been coordinated. It's sobering and slightly absurd, all this preparation, all this expense, for a catastrophe that was simultaneously unthinkable and constantly feared. Even the underground itself has hidden layers. When the Victoria Line was being planned in the 1960s, experimental tunnels were dug beneath Clapham to test new boring techniques and train designs. These tunnels still exist, occasionally used for further testing or as a training ground for engineers, but otherwise abandoned, a secret practice space beneath a line that carries thousands of passengers daily. Stand in a crowded tube carriage during rush hour, and you're surrounded by people who have no idea what lies beyond the tunnel walls rushing past. A few meters to the left or right might be another tunnel, disused and dark, or a wartime shelter, or a Victorian sewer, or a passage built by monks in the 14th century. London Underground is not a single layer but a palimpsest, each generation digging its own passages, building its own structures, and then often forgetting about them as new priorities emerge. There's something peculiarly human about all this digging. We've been doing it for millennia, creating caves and cellars, mines and tunnels, seeking safety or resources or simply more space in the crowded surface world. But London has taken it to an extreme, turning its geology, that deep layer of London clay, perfect for tunneling, into an opportunity. The city has grown downward as well as outward, creating a vertical complexity that matches its horizontal sprawl. Walk through Bank Station at rush hour, changing from the Northern Line to the Central, and you're navigating a space that extends through multiple levels, dozens of passages connecting platforms at different depths. It's disorienting, even with maps and signs. Escalators descend into darkness, corridors branch and reconnect, and you lose all sense of where you are in relation to the surface. You might be beneath the Bank of England or the Royal Exchange or somewhere entirely different. Underground, those surface landmarks become irrelevant. The city you navigate is purely functional, a network of routes and connections that bears only an abstract relationship to the London above. And the digging continues. Crossrail, now the Elizabeth Line, required massive new tunnels boring east to west across London, passing beneath the existing underground lines, creating a new layer of infrastructure. The Thames Tideway Tunnel, a massive sewer project, runs deep beneath the river, capturing overflow that used to pollute the Thames during storms. Each new project adds to the underground realm, creating chambers and passages that will outlast their builders, that will remain long after the specific need that created them has been forgotten. Someday perhaps, London will be excavated like Rome or Troy, and archaeologists will dig through these layers, the tube tunnels and wartime shelters, the Victorian sewers and medieval passages, the Roman aqueducts at the very bottom. They'll find the mail rail and wonder what it was for. They'll discover the deep-level shelters and reconstruct, perhaps, the terror that drove people to build them. They'll map the network of Cold War bunkers and shake their heads at the paranoia of the 20th century. But for now, the Shadow City remains functional, inhabited, essential. Every day, millions of Londoners descend into it, trusting their lives to tunnels bored through clay a century ago, to escalators and lifts that plunge into darkness, to the accumulated infrastructure of generations of diggers and builders. They emerge minutes later, blocks or miles away, barely thinking about what they've done, traveled through the earth itself, passed through chambers and passages that exist in permanent night, navigated a realm that never sees sun or rain. Late at night, when the trains stop running and the platforms empty, the underground becomes something different. Maintenance workers emerge, checking tracks and signals, repairing worn equipment, keeping the system functional for tomorrow's crowds. In the silence between trains, you might hear water dripping, the city's aquifers flowing around and through the tunnels, a reminder that London was built on a river and marshland, that water wants to reclaim these passages we've carved through its realm. Above, on the surface, London sleeps. Lights dim in office towers, streets empty, the city takes its brief rest. But below, the Shadow City remains, ancient and modern, practical and secretive, layer upon layer of human ambition carved into the earth. The Romans would recognize the impulse, if not the scale. We dig not just for shelter or transport or survival, but because we can, because the earth can be shaped to our purposes, because there's something deeply satisfying about creating space where before there was only solid ground. The tunnels wait in darkness, patient as stone, knowing they'll outlast us all. When the sky falls. There are nights, even now, when an aircraft passes low over London and for a moment, just a heartbeat, something ancient stirs in the city's memory. Those who remember the Blitz are nearly gone, the youngest survivors well into their 90s, but the city itself remembers. It remembers in the gaps between buildings where bombs fell and nothing was rebuilt. It remembers in the mixture of Victorian and 1950s architecture that mark streets where one house survived and its neighbor didn't. And it remembers, most deeply, in the tunnels and shelters and hidden rooms where Londoners learned to live with the sky as an enemy. September 7th, 1940. The sirens began wailing at 4 in the afternoon, that rising and falling note that would become the soundtrack to London's war. The first wave of German bombers came up the Thames, following the river like a road, dropping incendiaries and high explosives on the docks and the East End. The second wave came after dark, guided by the fires from the first attack, bombing by the light of their own destruction. By morning, over 400 Londoners were dead and thousands more injured. The warehouses along the river were ablaze, sugar and rum and timber burning together, the smoke visible for miles. It was the beginning of what would be called the Blitz, from the German word Blitzkrieg, lightning war, though there was nothing quick about it. For 57 consecutive nights, the bombers came. Then, with lessening frequency but continued menace, the raids continued for months more. By May 1941, when Hitler turned his attention eastward toward the Soviet Union, over 40,000 British civilians had been killed, half of them in London. Entire neighbourhoods had been reduced to rubble. St. Paul's Cathedral stood miraculously intact, photographed dramatically amid the smoke and flames, a symbol of defiance that became one of the war's most iconic images. But this chapter isn't about what fell. It's about what descended, the millions of Londoners who, night after night, went underground to survive. The government hadn't wanted people sheltering in the tube. There were official plans: Anderson shelters for those with gardens, Morrison shelters, essentially reinforced steel tables, for those without. Public shelters were built, reinforced basements designated, church crypts opened. But when the bombs started falling, Londoners made their own decision. They bought tickets, a penny halfpenny, and descended into the underground, and simply stayed there. At the height of the Blitz, over 177,000 people sheltered in the tube each night. The government eventually accepted it, even organized it. Bunks were installed, chemical toilets set up, canteens established. The platforms became underground villages, complete with their own social structures and hierarchies. Regular shelterers claimed their spots, returning each night to the same few feet of platform. Children did homework by torchlight. Adults played cards, read newspapers, sang songs to keep spirits up. The trains kept running, threading through crowds of people who barely looked up as the carriages passed. There was something extraordinary about it, this nightly migration underground. A photographer for Life magazine captured it, Henry Moore sketched it, the strange beauty of sleeping Londoners wrapped in blankets on concrete platforms, the arched tunnel ceilings curving over them like protective vaults. They look in those images like refugees from some ancient catastrophe, or perhaps like the earliest humans sheltering in caves. But they were ordinary people, clerks and shopkeepers, mothers and children, who happened to be living through a time when their own homes, their own beds, might kill them in the night. Not everywhere underground was open to the public. Deep beneath the streets of Whitehall, in rooms reinforced with concrete and protected by layers of earth and stone, Winston Churchill and his war cabinet directed Britain's defense. The cabinet war rooms, as they're now known, were a maze of over 20 rooms: cabinet meeting chamber, map room, Churchill's bedroom, offices for staff. The map room operated 24 hours a day, tracking convoys and troop movements, plotting the war on pins and colored threads stretched across maps of Europe, North Africa, the Atlantic. Churchill hated it down there, the confinement and recycled air, the sense of being buried alive. He spent as much time as possible on the surface, even during raids, much to the despair of his bodyguards. But when the bombing was heaviest, when the decision couldn't wait and the risk couldn't be justified, down he went into those rooms beneath Whitehall, where the fate of Britain was decided by men in shirt sleeves studying maps under electric light while, somewhere above them, the city burned. The war rooms are preserved now, maintained exactly as they were when the lights were finally switched off in August 1945. You can visit, walk through those cramped corridors, see the beds where staff snatched a few hours' sleep, the telephone that connected directly to Roosevelt in the White House. It's remarkably small, this command center of an empire at war. Cramped and claustrophobic and desperately functional. There's no grandeur here, no marble or gold leaf. Just rooms carved out of necessity, wired together with determination, kept running by people who understood that losing wasn't an option. But not all of Britain's underground war effort was defensive. Beneath Baker Street, an ordinary-looking building concealed something decidedly unordinary: the headquarters of the Special Operations Executive, Churchill's Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. SOE trained agents to parachute into occupied Europe, to organize resistance movements, to blow up bridges and railways and anything else that might inconvenience the German war machine. The building itself was unremarkable, but its basement connected to a network of tunnels where sabotage was taught as a science and explosives were tested in chambers designed to muffle the sound. The agents who passed through, British, French, Polish, Czech, drawn from across the free world, learned their trade in these underground rooms. How to blow a railway line with minimal explosives. How to kill silently. How to maintain cover stories under interrogation. How to operate radios and organize drop zones and navigate by stars. Many of them wouldn't survive the war. Some were captured, tortured, executed. Others simply vanished into occupied Europe and were never heard from again. But they learned their deadly skills beneath London streets, in tunnels that officially didn't exist, preparing for a kind of warfare that gentlemen's agreements had once considered beyond the pale. The war ended, but the threats didn't. The atomic age arrived with terrifying speed, Hiroshima and Nagasaki demonstrating what modern war could achieve. Then the Soviet Union developed its own bomb, and suddenly London found itself a potential target for something far worse than German bombers. The V-2 rockets that had fallen on London in 1944 and 1945, Hitler's vengeance weapons, terror weapons that gave no warning and couldn't be intercepted, were nothing compared to what nuclear missiles could do. So Britain dug deeper. The Burlington bunker complex beneath Corsham, southwest of London, was expanded into an underground city capable of housing 4,000 government personnel. It had offices, dormitories, a hospital, a BBC studio for broadcasting to whatever remained of the nation. Communications tunnels connected it to key facilities, including the crucial link to London. If the bombs fell, if the capital was destroyed, government would continue from Burlington. Ministers and civil servants would descend into the earth and attempt to coordinate survival and recovery while on the surface, Britain burned again. The Whitehall tunnels were upgraded, new communication hubs installed. The Kingsway Telephone Exchange, deep beneath Holborn, became a vital node in the network that would keep government and military in contact during a nuclear attack. Other bunkers were built, scattered around the country, regional seats of government, places from which local control could be maintained if central government was destroyed. The plans were comprehensive and horrifying. Detailed procedures for martial law, for food rationing far more severe than anything during World War II, for dealing with millions of casualties and refugees. Population control measures. Burial protocols, or more accurately, given the scale of death expected, non-burial protocols. The assumption was that Britain might lose a third of its population in the first attack, and that survivors would face radiation, fallout, collapsed infrastructure, and quite possibly nuclear winter. The people in the bunkers would emerge, eventually, to coordinate recovery in a world that might be barely habitable. It seems absurd now, this elaborate preparation for apocalypse. The bunkers feel like monuments to paranoia, to a fear that consumed entire governments. But stand in Burlington, walk through those endless corridors with their 1960s furniture and antiquated technology, and you realize, the people who built this were serious. They genuinely believed they might need it. They planned, in horrible detail, for the end of the world they knew. In the deepest tunnels beneath London, in spaces that have been decommissioned but not destroyed, there are places where the Blitz is remembered. Plaques commemorating shelters where people died when bombs scored direct hits, breaking through to the platforms below. Plans occasionally discussed, to create memorial spaces in the disused stations, to preserve them as monuments to civilian endurance, to that time when Londoners descended each night into the earth and emerged each morning to face what remained of their city. The tension between commemoration and forgetting shapes how London remembers its wars. Some scars are preserved, the bombed churches left as ruins, the plaques marking where V2 rockets fell. Others are built over, erased, returned to normal as quickly as possible. The impulse to remember and the impulse to move on exist simultaneously, and London has never quite resolved which should win. But walk through the city on a quiet evening, and you can still sense it, the accumulated memory of crisis and survival. That gap between buildings that's just slightly wider than it should be, where a bomb fell and only a small garden was planted afterward. The mixture of architecture that tells you, this building is Victorian, this one is post-war, this is where something was destroyed. The plaques you notice if you're paying attention. Near this spot fell the first bomb to strike the city of London in World War II. Or, in memory of the civilians who died here during enemy action. The generation that lived through the Blitz developed a mythology around it, the idea of Londoners pulling together, maintaining spirits, carrying on regardless. Keep calm and carry on, though that particular poster was never actually widely distributed during the war and only became popular decades later. The reality was more complicated. Looting happened, panic happened, not everyone was brave or stoic. But the mythology isn't entirely false either. London did endure. People did shelter in the tube and emerge each morning to go to work. The city did survive. And the infrastructure they built, the shelters and bunkers, the communication hubs and emergency systems remain. Decommissioned, mostly. Preserved as museums, some of them. But still there beneath the city, a reminder that London has repeatedly faced the possibility of destruction and has repeatedly prepared to survive it. There's a specific quality to crisis architecture, to spaces built for survival rather than comfort. The bare concrete walls, the minimal furnishings, the sense of everything being stripped to essentials. Walk through the Cabinet War Rooms or tour Burlington, and you're in spaces that make no concession to beauty or pleasure. They exist to protect, to enable survival and continuation. There's something honest about them, something that cuts through all the ceremony and tradition of normal governance to reveal what matters, staying alive, maintaining function, enduring. Perhaps that's what London learned from its wars, that beauty and tradition are luxuries that rest on a foundation of survival. The city can afford its pageantry, its ancient ceremonies and golden coaches, because it has also built the unglamorous infrastructure of endurance. The tunnels and shelters exist so that the palaces and parliaments above them can continue to exist. Tonight, London sleeps above ground. The sirens are silent. No bombers approach. The bunkers are empty, their blast doors rusting, their 1960s equipment obsolete. But they remain, and they could be activated again if needed. London has learned to hope for peace but prepare for crisis, to live normally while maintaining, just beneath the surface, the capacity for survival. The sky is no longer an enemy. Aircraft pass overhead and no one flinches. But the memory persists, embedded in the city's stones and tunnels, in the gap sites and the plaques, in the preserved shelters where you can still see where people scratch their names into walls while waiting for the all-clear. London endures. It always has. And if the sky should fall again, it knows how to descend, how to shelter, how to wait in darkness for the chance to rise again into whatever light remains. The art of movement. Every morning, London performs a miracle that has become so routine no one thinks to marvel at it anymore. 9 million people wake in homes scattered across one of the world's largest metropolitan areas, and somehow, through an impossibly complex dance of trains and buses, cars and bicycles, most of them arrive where they need to be, approximately when they need to be there. The system shouldn't work. The city is too old, its streets too narrow, its infrastructure cobbled together from centuries of piecemeal development. And yet it does work, more or less, because London has spent the better part of 2 centuries learning the difficult art of moving millions. The story begins, appropriately enough, beneath the ground. On January 10, 1863, the Metropolitan Railway opened between Paddington and Farringdon Street, carrying 30,000 passengers on its first day through tunnels that had been carved beneath London's streets. It was the world's first underground passenger railway, and it represented a radical solution to an increasingly desperate problem. London was choking on its own success. By the mid-19th century, the city's population was exploding. People poured in from the countryside seeking work in factories and docks, in offices and shops. The streets, designed for a fraction of the traffic they now carried, became impassable. Crossing London could take hours. Horse-drawn omnibuses and cabs competed for space with private carriages, carts, and pedestrians in a chaos that grew worse each year. Something had to change, and what changed was the very idea of where a railway could run. The early underground was built using the cut-and-cover method, essentially digging a trench, building a brick-lined tunnel, and covering it back over. It was disruptive and expensive, requiring the demolition of buildings and the excavation of entire streets. But it worked. The trains were hauled by steam locomotives, which made for an unpleasant experience. The tunnels filled with smoke and steam, the air thick and choking, but Londoners endured it because it was faster than the alternatives. The Metropolitan Railway was profitable from the start, and other companies quickly followed, excavating their own routes, connecting different parts of the city, creating the beginnings of the network that would eventually cover London like a spiderweb. The breakthrough came with deep-level tubes, bored through London's clay far below the surface using cylindrical tunneling shields. The first of these opened in 1890, running from the city to Stockwell, hauled initially by electric locomotives through narrow tunnels barely larger than the trains themselves. This was the future: clean, quiet electric trains running through deep tunnels that didn't disrupt the surface, that could pass beneath buildings and rivers without touching them. The technology spread quickly. More tube lines were bored, more stations opened, and gradually a system emerged, not planned from above by some central authority, but evolved through competition and consolidation, through the ambitions of private companies that eventually merged and were finally nationalized. Stand on a platform today during rush hour, watching train after train arrive, disgorge passengers, and depart with mechanical regularity, and you're witnessing the culmination of over a century and a half of engineering refinement. The Victoria Line, opened in stages between 1968 and 1971, was the first fully automated line, its trains controlled by computers that managed speed and spacing with a precision no human driver could match. Before it opened, experimental tunnels were dug beneath Clapham, where engineers tested every aspect of the new system: the tunneling techniques, the track design, the automation equipment, making mistakes in private so they could get it right in public. The Victoria Line represented a particular kind of British genius: the willingness to experiment, to test radical ideas, to push technological boundaries even when, especially when, tradition suggested caution. The automation worked. The line became one of the Underground's most reliable, its trains running at headways as short as 2 minutes during peak periods, carrying over 200 million passengers per year through tunnels that had been impossible to dig a generation earlier. But the Underground, crucial as it is, represents only one thread in London's transport tapestry. Above ground, moving through streets that still roughly follow their medieval predecessors, the buses run. The red double-decker bus has become as iconic as Big Ben or Tower Bridge, recognized globally as a symbol of London. But the reason London uses double-deckers isn't aesthetics, it's mathematics. The city's streets are narrow, too narrow to widen without demolishing buildings, too congested to accommodate more vehicles. The only way to move more people was to move them vertically, stacking passengers in 2 levels. The first motor buses appeared in 1904, replacing horse-drawn omnibuses, and by the 1920s, double-deckers dominated. They evolved through decades of refinement. The Route Master, with its open rear platform and elegant lines, became the beloved classic, serving from 1956 until 2005. The modern replacements are more efficient, more accessible, but something was lost when the open platform disappeared, when you could no longer hop on and off between stops, when the conductor who knew every regular passenger vanished in favor of automatic doors and electronic payment. Still, the buses persist, carrying 6 million passengers daily across a network of over 700 routes. On a map, the bus routes create a dense mesh covering Greater London far more completely than the Underground, serving areas where no tube reaches, providing the everyday transport for millions who rely on them entirely. And they navigate according to rules that baffle visitors but seem natural to Londoners. They drive on the left. The persistence of left-hand traffic in Britain, and by extension London, has practical origins lost to certainty but likely medieval. The prevailing theory suggests that when mounted knights passed each other on narrow roads, keeping to the left meant their right hand, their sword hand, was closest to a potential opponent. Whatever the origin, by the time roads were being standardized in the 18th century, left-hand traffic was customary in Britain. The 1835 Highway Act codified it, and despite most of the world eventually choosing the right, Britain stayed left. This means London's roads are designed for it. Roundabouts flow clockwise, intersections assume left-turning traffic. The entire system operates on principles that seem backwards to most of the planet but make perfect sense if you grew up with them. And then there are the taxis. The famous black cabs, though many are no longer black, distinguished not by color but by their unique shape and, crucially, by their driver's knowledge. The knowledge is a peculiarly London institution, a test so comprehensive and demanding that it typically takes 3 to 4 years to complete. Aspiring taxi drivers must learn every street, every landmark, every theater and hotel and hospital within a 6-mile radius of Charing Cross. Not just memorize them but know them, understand how they connect, which routes are fastest at different times of day, where roadworks might slow you down, which one-way systems have recently changed. They ride around on mopeds with clipboards strapped to the handlebars, learning routes, memorizing, testing themselves. Studies have shown that the knowledge actually changes taxi drivers' brains, enlarging the hippocampus, the region associated with spatial memory. It's an absurd system in the age of GPS and navigation apps. An algorithm can plot the fastest route in seconds. But the knowledge persists because it represents something deeper than mere navigation. Its mastery of the city itself, an internalized map more sophisticated than anything that can be reduced to software. A properly knowledgeable cab driver doesn't just know the fastest route, they know why it's fastest, what alternatives exist, how to adapt when circumstances change. They carry London in their heads, the entire complicated organism of streets and shortcuts, and that knowledge can't be replicated by someone following turn-by-turn directions on a screen. The city's determination to move people extends beyond its boundaries. London is served by 6 airports: Heathrow, Gatwick, Stansted, Luton, Southend and City, a redundancy that seems excessive until you consider the volume. Heathrow alone handles over 80 million passengers annually, making it Europe's busiest airport. No single airport could handle London's air traffic. The city needs multiple hubs, each serving different airlines and destinations, each connected to the city by rail links that carry passengers from the airport to central London in less than an hour. This multi-airport system evolved organically, each facility developed to serve a specific need: Heathrow for international long-haul, City for business traffic to Europe, Gatwick and Stansted for leisure and budget airlines, Luton and Southend for overspill. It's inefficient in some ways. Airlines can't easily consolidate operations. Passengers must carefully verify which airport their flight departs from. But it works because London is too large, its traffic too diverse, to be served by a single facility. The city has grown beyond what Victorian engineers could have imagined, and its transport network has grown to match. Some solutions to London's transport challenges are wonderfully simple. The Greenwich Foot Tunnel, opened in 1902, runs beneath the Thames, connecting Greenwich on the south bank to the Isle of Dogs on the north. It's a Victorian solution to a Victorian problem: how to allow workers who lived south of the river to reach the docks and shipyards on the north bank. 2 circular tunnels, lined with cast iron rings, just large enough for pedestrians, descending via spiral staircases in glazed brick shafts topped with distinctive glass domes. Over a century later, it still serves its purpose. Pedestrians and cyclists use it daily, passing beneath the river while ships pass above, a quiet piece of infrastructure doing its job with minimal fuss. That's perhaps the key to understanding London's transport system: it's accumulated, not designed. No single mind planned it. No master architect drew up the whole thing and said, "Build this." Instead, it grew problem by problem, solution by solution, each generation adding what it needed, modifying what existed, occasionally tearing down and starting over, but more often simply building adjacent to or beneath or around what was already there. The result is a system of bewildering complexity. The tube map, the triumph of graphic design created by Harry Beck in 1931, doesn't attempt to show London's geography accurately. Instead, it reduces the network to a diagram of colored lines and connection points, topologically correct but spatially distorted, making the system comprehensible by stripping away everything except essential relationships. It's one of the most copied designs in the world, imitated by transit systems globally, because Beck understood something fundamental. When you're underground, physical geography becomes irrelevant. What matters is connections, sequences, the abstract pattern of how things relate to each other. Ride the underground during rush hour, if you can bear it, and you're participating in a collective achievement that borders on choreography. Millions of people navigate this system daily, most of them doing it without conscious thought, trained by repetition into patterns of movement that are efficient precisely because everyone knows them. Stand on the right on escalators, walk on the left. Wait behind the yellow line. Let people off before boarding. Mind the gap. These aren't just rules, they're a shared language of movement, a set of conventions that allow massive numbers of people to occupy limited space without chaos. When it works, London's transport system is invisible. You get on the tube at one end of the city and emerge at the other, and the mechanism that moved you, the trains and tunnels, the signals and switches, the human operators and computer systems coordinating it all, fades into background noise. It's only when it breaks, when a signal failure or track problem or overcrowding brings the system to a halt, that you notice the complexity, the fragility, the sheer improbability of it all working as well as it does. Evening descends on the city, and the Great Migration reverses. The trains fill again with people heading home, the buses trace their routes outward from the center, the taxis prowl for fares. Heathrow lands and launches aircraft every 45 seconds during peak hours. The Thames clipper boats carry commuters along the river, the oldest route of all, updated for the 21st century with high-speed catamarans. London moves. It has learned to move, developed systems and technologies and customs that allow millions to navigate a space that should be impossibly congested. And it keeps learning, keeps adapting. Crossrail, the Elizabeth Line, opened in 2022, adding another layer to the transport network, connecting East and West London through new tunnels that burrow beneath the existing underground. Cycling infrastructure expands. Electric vehicles gradually replace diesel buses. The system evolves because it must, because a city this size cannot afford to stand still. Stand on Westminster Bridge at dusk, watching the traffic flow across the Thames, cars and buses and taxis, pedestrians on the sidewalks, boats on the river, trains rumbling through tunnels beneath your feet, and you're witnessing the daily miracle-made routine. London moves. 9 million people wake and sleep and move between them, and the city they move through has spent centuries learning to accommodate them, to carry them, to keep them flowing like blood through arteries. The Romans would understand the impulse, if not the scale. They built roads to move armies and goods. Modern London builds railways and bus lanes to move people and commerce. Different tools, different challenges, same essential purpose, connection. Movement. The refusal to let distance or density prevent the city from functioning. The trains run. The buses navigate narrow streets. The taxis carry their knowledge. And London, that vast improbable organism, continues to move, to breathe, to live through the circulation of millions who trust each day that the systems built by their predecessors will carry them where they need to go. They always have. They always will. That's what engineering innovation means in the end. Not just building something remarkable, but building something that works, that endures, that becomes so reliable it fades into the background of daily life, invisible until you stop to think about the miracle of it all. The living river. The Thames is older than London, older than England, older than any name humans have given it. It has flowed for millions of years, carving its valley through chalk and clay, finding its way to the sea with the patient inevitability of water. Everything else, the bridges and embankments, the buildings that line its banks, the city that grew up around it, these are temporary annotations on a text that was already ancient when the Romans arrived. Stand on any bridge in central London and watch the water below. Notice how it moves, which direction the current flows. Come back 6 hours later and it will have reversed. The Thames in London is tidal, has always been tidal, its flow controlled not just by rainfall in the Cotswolds where it rises, but by the moon's pull on the North Sea. Twice daily, the tide surges up from the estuary, pushing salt water inland past Greenwich and the Isle of Dogs, past Wapping and Tower Bridge, all the way to Teddington where a lock finally stops it. The river breathes in and out with lunar rhythm, rising and falling by as much as 7 meters at London Bridge, its character changing with the tides in ways that shaped how the city related to it for 2,000 years. The Romans understood immediately what this meant. A tidal river allowed ships to sail inland, pushed by the incoming tide, then depart on the ebb. Their bridge, the first London Bridge, marked the practical limit of navigation for large vessels. Ships could reach this point from the continent, unload cargo that could then be transported across Britain by road, and load British goods for the return journey. The Thames made London possible as a port, and being a port made London important. For centuries, the river was London's main highway. Roads were poor, slow, sometimes impassable. The Thames was reliable, wide enough for traffic, connecting the city to the sea and thus to the world beyond. Goods came up the river, wine from France, timber from the Baltic, spices from further afield once England began trading globally. The docks lined both banks, warehouses rising behind them, the whole eastern stretch of the river a working waterfront where ships queued for berths and watermen ferried passengers between banks and out to vessels anchored in midstream. The watermen were a guild unto themselves, licensed and regulated, plying their trade in small boats, calling for fares at the various stairs, water gates, that descended to the river. Before bridges multiplied, crossing the Thames meant hiring a waterman, and they were as much a part of London life as the streets themselves. They had their own language, their own customs, their own rivalries with the Thames bargemen who hauled cargo. When London Bridge was rebuilt with fewer, wider arches in the 1820s, replacing the medieval structure that had stood for 6 centuries, the watermen mourned. The old bridge's narrow arches had created such fierce currents that only skilled watermen could navigate them, giving them a monopoly on passage. The new bridge was safer but less profitable. The Thames was also a defense. Enemies approaching London from the sea had to sail up the river, exposing themselves to fortifications along both banks. The Tower of London stands where it does partly because that position controls the river approach to the city. Later, as naval warfare developed, the Thames estuary became a crucial strategic zone, protected by forts and eventually, by mines and submarine nets during the World Wars. The river was both entrance and barrier, invitation and obstacle. But in the coldest winters, the Thames became something else entirely, a playground. The medieval and early modern Thames was wider and shallower than the modern river, its flow slowed by the old London Bridge's 20 narrow arches which acted almost like a dam. In severe winters, the combination of slow flow and extreme cold allowed the river to freeze solid, and when it did, Londoners took to the ice. The first recorded frost fair was in 1608, but the practice became most famous in the 17th and 18th centuries, when the Thames froze several times and elaborate festivals erupted on the ice. Imagine it, the river that defined London, that carried its commerce and shaped its geography, suddenly transformed into a solid surface where people could walk, set up tents, roast oxen, play games. The Frost Fair of 1683 to 84 lasted 2 months. Whole streets of booths and tents appeared, selling food and drink, offering entertainments. Printers set up presses on the ice and sold commemorative cards. An elephant was led across the frozen Thames near Blackfriars. King Charles II himself visited, conducting royal business on the frozen river, while Londoners skated and drank and celebrated the sheer improbability of it all. The last great frost fair was in 1814. The ice was thick enough for an elephant, again, elephants feature prominently in Thames history, to be led across near Blackfriars Bridge. There were puppet shows and 9-pin bowling, bear baiting and printing presses. Londoners danced and drank and roasted meat over fires set directly on the ice, seemingly unconcerned that they were standing on frozen water above a river whose currents could be treacherous. Then the ice broke. The thaw, when it came, was sudden. The ice fractured, booths and tents and their contents swept away by the returning current. Some people were caught on ice floes, rescued or drowned depending on their proximity to the banks. The river reclaimed itself, and it would never freeze like that again. When the old London Bridge was demolished in the 1830s, replaced by a structure with wider arches that allowed the river to flow more freely, the conditions that created the frost fares vanished. The Thames still freezes occasionally in its upper reaches, but in London, it remains liquid even in the coldest winters, too fast-flowing and too salty with tidal seawater to freeze solid. The river has always held strange stories. In 1252, Henry III kept a polar bear at the Tower of London, a gift from the King of Norway. The bear was allowed to swim in the Thames, attached to a long chain, fishing for its own supper while Londoners watched from the banks. Later, when the Tower's menagerie, a collection that included lions, elephants and various exotic beasts, was moved to Regent's Park to become the London Zoo, the animals were transported through the streets, creating a procession that must have seemed like something from a fever dream. A giraffe walking down Piccadilly. Elephants crossing London Bridge. The exotic and the everyday colliding in ways that only London could produce. But by the 19th century, the Thames was dying. The population explosion that accompanied industrialization overwhelmed London's sanitation systems. Sewage poured into the river, both directly and via the countless streams and tributaries that had been turned into open sewers. The river became a toxic soup, dark and foul-smelling, deadly to touch and worse to drink. The Great Stink of 1858, when a hot summer turned the Thames into an open cesspit that made Parliament uninhabitable, finally forced action. Joseph Bazalgette's Great Sewer System, completed in the 1860s, intercepted sewage before it reached the river and carried it downstream to treatment plants. The embankments were built, raising the riverbanks and reclaiming land while hiding the sewers beneath Victorian stonework. Yet even Bazalgette's genius couldn't fully save the river. Industrial pollution continued. By the 1950s, the Thames through central London was biologically dead. No fish, no plants, the water so depleted of oxygen that nothing could survive in it. The river that had teemed with life for millions of years had become, in the space of a century, essentially sterile. Salmon, which had once been so common in the Thames that apprentices allegedly complained about being fed it too often, had vanished entirely by the 1830s. The return of life to the Thames is one of London's quiet triumphs, a success story that unfolded over decades with little fanfare. Cleaner industrial practices, better sewage treatment, environmental regulations, gradually, incrementally, the water quality improved. By the 1970s, fish were returning. By the 1980s, over 100 species had been recorded in the tidal Thames. And in 1974, something remarkable happened. A salmon was caught in the Thames at West Thurrock, the first in over a century. It wasn't a fluke. Salmon kept returning, in small but increasing numbers. By 2005, several hundred salmon were estimated to be entering the Thames each year. Seahorses were found in the river, seahorses in the Thames, improbable as elephants on the ice. Seals became regular visitors, spotted as far upstream as Richmond. The river was alive again, not pristine perhaps, but functional as an ecosystem, capable of supporting the food chains and life cycles it had sustained for millennia before London industrialized. Walk along the South Bank today, and you might see herons stalking the shore at low tide, or cormorants diving for fish. The foreshore, exposed when the tide recedes, is a different London entirely, muddy and ancient, scattered with debris from every era of the city's history. Mudlarks search it, finding Roman pottery, medieval pilgrim badges, clay pipes, coins, the accumulated detritus of 2,000 years of urban life washed into the river and preserved in its mud. The Thames has become a playground again, though in different ways than during the frost fares. River buses carry commuters, the Thames Clipper catamarans racing upstream on the flood tide, providing an alternative to crowded tube trains. Tourist boats cruise between Westminster and Greenwich, their passengers photographing the sights that line the banks. Private vessels crowd the marinas, and on summer evenings, the riverside paths fill with people walking, cycling, sitting at outdoor restaurants, treating the Thames as an amenity rather than an industrial feature. The Thames Tunnel, Brunel's achievement that we touched on earlier, represented a crucial moment in humanity's relationship with the river. For the first time, people could pass beneath the Thames, could treat it as an obstacle to be engineered around rather than an impassable boundary. Other tunnels followed, the Blackwall Tunnel, the Rotherhithe Tunnel, eventually the underground lines that now cross and recross the river through bored tubes deep below the riverbed. The Thames remained important, but it ceased to divide London quite so absolutely. Yet the river asserts itself. The Thames Barrier, that row of massive steel shells across the river at Woolwich, exists because the Thames can still threaten the city. High tides combined with storm surges from the North Sea can push dangerous amounts of water upstream. Without the barrier, raised when flooding threatens to close the gates against the surge, large parts of London would regularly flood. Climate change makes this threat more pressing. Sea levels rise, storms intensify, and the barrier, completed in 1984, may need reinforcement or replacement sooner than its designers expected. The Thames is patient and powerful, and treating it as a tame amenity requires constant vigilance and expensive infrastructure. But on quiet mornings, when mist rises from the water and the city is just waking, you can stand on a bridge and see the Thames as something close to timeless. The water flows as it has always flowed, tidal and indifferent to the structures that line its banks. Gulls wheel overhead, their cries echoing off stone embankments. A seal surfaces briefly, regards you with dark eyes, and disappears back into the murk. The river moves through London, carrying the North Sea's salt inland and London's freshwater downstream, mixing them in the brackish zone where sea and land meet. The Thames made London possible. It determined where the Romans built their bridge, where merchants unloaded their goods, where the city would grow. It provided transport, defense, sometimes food, occasionally entertainment. It became a sewer, died, and was resurrected through human effort and environmental regulation. It flooded neighbourhoods until the barrier was built to stop it. It froze solid and became a fairground. It carried trade that built an empire and pollution that nearly killed it. And through it all, the river endured. It outlasted the Romans, the medieval city, the imperial capital. It will outlast the modern city too, will still be flowing long after the towers and bridges have crumbled into its bed. That's the nature of rivers. They are patient beyond human comprehension, permanent in ways that nothing humans build can match. Walk the Thames path on a winter evening as darkness falls. The lights of the city reflect on the moving water, fragmenting and reforming with each ripple. A tour boat passes, heading downstream with the ebb tide, its wake spreading across the river. Somewhere beneath the surface, perhaps, a salmon swims upstream, driven by instinct to return to spawning grounds it has never seen. The river flows, as it has always flowed, as it will always flow. London built itself around the Thames, shaped itself to the river's rhythms, learned to live with its tides and floods and occasional freezings. The city is unimaginable without the river, could not have grown where it did, could not have become what it became, without this particular waterway in this particular place. The Thames flows through London, but in a deeper sense, London flows from the Thames, grew from it, depends on it, returns to it for renewal. The river is not just a feature of the city's geography but the foundation of its existence, the reason for its location, the source of its first prosperity. Everything else followed from this: the bridge, the walls, the streets, the underground, the power and the commerce and the accumulated history of 2 millennia. The river remembers it all. The water that flows past Westminster tonight will be at the North Sea tomorrow, mixed with the ocean, part of the great planetary circulation. And tomorrow night, the tide will push new water inland, past Greenwich and Tower Bridge, past the city and Westminster, all the way to Teddington. The river breathes in and out, lunar-driven, eternal. London lives because the Thames flows. It always has. It always will. The skyline's memory. London's skyline is an argument conducted in stone and glass and steel, a debate between past and future that has been going on for centuries and shows no sign of resolution. Stand on Waterloo Bridge at sunset and look east toward the city, and you'll see it all laid out before you: the dome of St. Paul's, unchanged since 1710, surrounded by towers that didn't exist a generation ago. The Shard rises to the south, a glass pyramid that seems to dissolve into the sky at its apex. The Gherkin curves eastward, its distinctive shape unmistakable even in silhouette. And somewhere in the tangle of old and new, tradition and innovation argue about who gets to define what London looks like. The argument is older than it seems. London has been rebuilt, reimagined, and reconstructed so many times that its current appearance is less a single vision than a layered compromise between competing ideas about what a city should be. But the defining moment, the catastrophe that gave London its chance to reimagine itself completely, came on September 2, 1666. The Great Fire started in a bakery on Pudding Lane, a small fire in a city where small fires were common. But this one spread. Fanned by strong winds and finding fuel in the timber-framed houses packed tight in medieval streets, it became an inferno. For 4 days it burned, consuming 13,000 houses, 87 churches, and most of the great public buildings within the old city walls. When the flames finally exhausted themselves, having reached the stone walls of the Tower of London and found no more timber to feed them, 4/5 of the city had been destroyed. The devastation was almost total, and it presented an opportunity. Christopher Wren, already making his name as an architect and scientist, proposed a grand plan: sweep away the medieval street pattern entirely and rebuild London as a Baroque city of wide boulevards and geometric precision, a capital that would rival Paris or Rome for planned magnificence. He wasn't alone. Several architects submitted visions for a new London, each grander than the last. None were adopted. Property rights proved stronger than architectural vision. Landowners wanted to rebuild on their old plots, merchants wanted their shops back, and the sheer urgency of housing a displaced population meant reconstruction began before any grand plan could be implemented. The streets were widened somewhat, and required to be built in brick rather than timber, but the basic medieval pattern reasserted itself. London rebuilt as London, only slightly improved. What Wren did achieve was the churches. He was commissioned to rebuild 51 of the churches destroyed in the fire, and each became a small masterpiece of ingenuity, fitting elaborate interiors into awkward medieval plots, creating distinctive steeples that would define London's skyline for generations. And above them all, dominating the city, rose his greatest achievement, the new St. Paul's Cathedral. The old cathedral had been medieval, Gothic, incomplete, and damaged even before the fire destroyed it. Wren's replacement took 35 years to build and represented something entirely different, a Baroque masterpiece crowned by a dome that was, at the time, a marvel of engineering. The dome appears to be a single structure but is actually three: an inner dome visible from the church floor, an outer dome that creates the external profile, and between them, a brick cone that supports the weight of the whole assembly and carries the massive stone lantern that tops the structure. It's a lie in a way, a beautiful deception where the engineering and the appearance serve different purposes, and neither could exist without the other. St. Paul's Dome became London's defining landmark, the point from which everything else was measured. When Wren stood atop Ludgate Hill in 1697, watching the dome nearing completion, he was creating something that would control London's skyline for more than 3 centuries, long past his death, long past anyone's ability to imagine the city that would eventually surround it. Because St. Paul's is protected now, in ways its builders never imagined. There are viewing corridors, specific sight lines from designated points across London from which the dome must remain visible. From Parliament Hill on Hampstead Heath, from Greenwich Park, from Richmond Park, these views are protected by law. No building can be erected that would block them. The dome must remain visible, a fixed point in a changing city, a reminder of continuity amid transformation. This protection shapes the modern skyline in profound ways. The Shard Renzo Piano's glass pyramid that rises 309.6 meters above London Bridge was designed with these sightlines in mind. Its tapered form, the way it dissolves into transparency toward the top, these aren't just aesthetic choices, they're practical solutions to regulatory constraints. The building had to be tall enough to justify its existence as Western Europe's tallest building, but couldn't block protected views of St. Paul's. Piano's solution was elegant: make the building so thin, so translucent, that you can see through it. The shard doesn't hide St. Paul's, it creates a new layer of skyline without obscuring the old. Not every modern addition has been so graceful. The walkie-talkie, officially 20, Fenchurch Street, rises from the city like a top-heavy mushroom, its distinctive concave shape bulging outward as it rises. The design was meant to reduce the building's footprint at street level while maximizing floor space higher up, but the concave glass facade created an unexpected problem. It focused sunlight into a concentrated beam that melted car parts, scorched doormat, and briefly made life uncomfortable for anyone walking past on a sunny day. The building acquired various nicknames, none of them flattering, before solar shading was added to mitigate the death ray effect. But the walkie-talkie redeemed itself, partially, with the Sky Garden. The top 3 floors are a public space, a terraced garden enclosed in glass, accessible for free though booking is required. Stand up there on a clear day, looking out across London, and you're seeing the city the way it was meant to be seen, as a whole, not a collection of isolated streets and buildings but a vast organism spreading in all directions, following the Thames as it curves through the landscape. You can see St. Paul's from here, of course, the dome rising among the towers, still commanding attention centuries after it was built. You can see the Shard to the south, the Gherkin nearby, Canary Wharf to the east. The view becomes a lesson in London's architectural history, each building representing its era's ambitions and constraints. Tower Bridge, that Victorian Gothic fantasy that tourists often mistake for London Bridge, represents another kind of architectural achievement. Completed in 1894, it was pure engineering necessity wrapped in historical costume. London needed a crossing downstream from London Bridge, but it had to be high enough for ships to pass beneath and capable of opening for taller vessels. The solution was a bascule bridge, 2 massive counterweight arms that could be raised independently, powered by hydraulic engines housed in the Victorian Gothic towers. The towers themselves, with their turrets and crenellations, were a deliberate choice. The bridge could have been purely functional, all exposed iron and mechanical honesty like the Forth Bridge or the Eiffel Tower. But London wanted something that looked like London, something that would complement the Tower of London nearby and fit the city's image of itself. So engineer John Wolfberry and architect Horace Jones created a structure that was utterly modern in function but traditional in appearance. Steel framing hidden behind Cornish granite and Portland stone, the latest hydraulic technology concealed within towers that looked like they belonged to a medieval castle. The bridge worked, and still works. The bascules still rise several hundred times a year to let ships pass, the Victorian hydraulic engines replaced by electric motors but the basic mechanism unchanged. And the Gothic clothing has proven surprisingly durable, allowing the bridge to become iconic precisely because it looks like what people expect London to look like: old, historical, traditional, even when it's actually a triumph of Victorian engineering. This tension between appearance and innovation defines much of London's relationship with its built environment. The city wants to be modern, to attract investment and accommodate growth, to build the towers that global finance demands. But it also wants to remain London, to preserve the character and history that make it distinctive. The result is a skyline of compromises, each building negotiating between these competing demands. The Gherkin, 30 St. Mary Axe, to use its proper address, managed this negotiation successfully. Designed by Norman Foster and completed in 2004, it was among the first of the new generation of city towers, and its distinctive aerodynamic shape, wider in the middle than at base or top, became instantly recognizable. But it was also carefully sited, rising where the old Baltic Exchange had been destroyed by an IRA bomb in 1992. The building is tall but not overwhelming, distinctive but not aggressive, modern but somehow English in its eccentricity. Londoners initially resisted it, as Londoners resist all change, but gradually accepted it, even grew fond of it. The nickname helped. The Gherkin is affectionate in a way 30 St. Mary Axe never could be. Other additions have proven more controversial. The Garden Bridge, proposed to span the Thames as a planted walkway with trees and gardens, attracted both enthusiasm and fierce opposition before being abandoned in 2017, its budget spiraling and its practical purpose unclear. The Tulip, a proposed viewing tower next to the Gherkin, was rejected after criticism that it would serve no purpose beyond being tall. London accepts new buildings, but only if they justify themselves, only if they contribute something beyond developer profit. The planning system that controls all this is Byzantine in its complexity, layered with protections and regulations accumulated over centuries. Listed buildings cannot be demolished or substantially altered without permission. Conservation areas restrict what can be built. The protected viewing corridors we mentioned constrain heights and positions. And hovering over everything is the question of Londonness. Does a proposed building fit the character of the city, whatever that means? It's a system that frustrates developers and architects used to more permissive environments. But it's also what prevents London from becoming anywhere, from losing its distinctive character in favor of the generic glassbox architecture that could be in Shanghai or Dubai or Toronto. The restrictions force creativity, require architects to work within constraints, to respond to history rather than ignore it. Walk through the city on a Sunday, when it's quiet, and you can read architectural history in the skyline. There's the medieval street pattern, still visible in the way roads meet at odd angles and curve where Roman streets were straight. There are Wren's church steeples, poking up between modern towers, surprisingly numerous considering how many churches were deconsecrated and demolished over the centuries. There's the Victorian commercial architecture, solid Portland stone buildings that housed banks and insurance companies when Britain ruled a quarter of the globe. And rising among them, the glass and steel towers of the 21st century, each trying to establish its identity while fitting into a cityscape it didn't create and can't fully control. The Leadenhall Building, another city tower, addresses its constrained site with a dramatic diagonal brace up its north face, earning it the nickname the Cheese Grater. Its wedge shape was specifically designed to preserve views of St. Paul's from Fleet Street, yet another building bowing to the 300-year-old precedent of Wren's Dome. Architecture in London is never purely about the building itself, it's always about how that building relates to everything around it, to history and context and the accumulated weight of centuries. Across the river, the South Bank tells a different story. This was industrial land, warehouses and wharves and the working waterfront, never prestigious enough to attract the grand architecture of the North Bank. When it redeveloped in the 20th century, it did so with more freedom, creating the modernist concrete landscape of the National Theatre, the brutalist mass of the Hayward Gallery, the Royal Festival Hall's clean post-war optimism. These buildings polarize opinion. Some find them ugly, others celebrate their honest functionalism, but they represent a different approach to architecture, one less concerned with fitting in and more focused on expressing their specific purpose and moment. And then there's the Millennium Dome, now the O2 Arena, Richard Rogers's enormous tent of cable and fabric stretched over 12 yellow steel masts. Built to celebrate the year 2000, it initially struggled to find a purpose, becoming a symbol of millennial optimism curdling into embarrassment. But it survived, reinvented itself as a concert venue and entertainment complex, and now seems permanent, its distinctive silhouette on the Thames a reminder that not every architectural experiment needs to succeed immediately to eventually prove valuable. Evening settles over London, and the towers light up, each building becoming a lantern, together creating a cityscape of layered light. The Shard glows like a beacon. The walkie-talkie sky garden floats in the darkness. The Gherkin's lighting traces its spiraling structure. And among them, illuminated by spotlights that have done this duty for decades, St. Paul's Dome rides above the modern skyline, unchanged and unchangeable, still defining London by refusing to yield to it. This is London's architectural genius, not the individual buildings, though many are remarkable, but the conversation between them, the way history and innovation argue without either side winning completely. The city accepts new buildings but constrains them, allows growth but demands respect, permits change while insisting on continuity. Stand on Waterloo Bridge tonight, looking east as we started, and the skyline reads like a family portrait, multiple generations present, none identical, each reflecting its time but all recognizably related. The medieval streets flow beneath Victorian buildings crowned by post-war reconstruction topped by contemporary towers, and somehow it all coheres, somehow it's unmistakably London. The skyline's memory is long. It remembers Christopher Wren's ambition, the great fire that created opportunity, the medieval streets that refuse to disappear, the protective instinct that preserves views of a 300-year-old dome. It remembers every compromise, every heated planning meeting, every architect's vision modified by historical constraint. And it will remember what comes next, whatever towers rise, whatever innovations arrive, because London's skyline doesn't simply change. It accumulates, adds layers, creates complexity. The past doesn't vanish. It persists, constraining and shaping the future, ensuring that London tomorrow will still be recognizable to someone who knew London yesterday. The dome remains. The debate continues. And the skyline, that argument conducted in architecture, rises into the London night, illuminated and impossible, ancient and modern, forever negotiating between what it was and what it might become. The urban forest. There are foxes in London. Not in some metaphorical sense, not as a romantic exaggeration, but actually, physically present, red foxes, vulpes vulpes, living in gardens and railway embankments, hunting in parks and rummaging through bins, raising cubs under garden sheds. At night, if you're quiet, you might see one trotting down a residential street with the casual confidence of someone who knows they belong here. London has one of the highest urban fox densities in the world, an estimated 10,000 animals living wild in a city of 9 million people, and most Londoners have simply accepted this, the way you accept pigeons or squirrels or any other wildlife that shares your space. This is the London that visitors don't expect, not a concrete jungle but an urban forest, a metropolis that is, remarkably, over a third green space. 8 million trees grow within Greater London's boundaries, more trees than people in many cities. The figure seems impossible until you start looking, really looking, at what surrounds you. The plane trees lining residential streets, their camouflage bark distinctive and beautiful. The ancient oaks in the parks, some predating the city itself. The garden trees, the park trees, the cemetery trees, the railway embankment trees, the wasteland trees that seed themselves in forgotten corners and grow unnoticed until they're substantial enough to demand acknowledgement. London didn't plan to be this green. It evolved into it, through a combination of historical accident, Victorian philanthropy, careful preservation, and the simple fact that once you designate something as a park or common, it's politically nearly impossible to build on it. The result is a city laced with green spaces, from pocket gardens barely larger than a room to vast parks that feel like countryside despite being thoroughly urban. Start with the royal parks, the most famous and the most central. Hyde Park and Kensington Gardens together cover 600 acres of central London, an enormous lung of grass and trees and water that shouldn't exist in one of the world's most expensive real estate markets but does, because it was royal hunting ground and became public amenity and now simply is, protected by history and habit and the certainty that any government that tried to develop it would face revolution. Walk through Hyde Park on a summer afternoon and you're walking through carefully managed wilderness. The Serpentine curves through the park, its water home to ducks and geese and coots, swans gliding with territorial aggression, occasionally a heron standing motionless at the edge waiting. People swim in the Serpentine, have done so since the Serpentine Swimming Club was founded in 1864. On Christmas morning, club members break the ice if necessary to maintain their annual tradition, plunging into water that might be a few degrees above freezing while spectators watch from the shore, probably questioning the swimmer's sanity while secretly admiring their commitment. The trees in Hyde Park are substantial, mature specimens that provide genuine canopy. In summer, walking beneath them, you can forget you're in central London. The traffic noise fades, filtered by leaves and distance. Sunlight dapples through the branches. Parakeets, ring-necked parakeets, emerald green and raucous, an escaped or released species that has established wild breeding populations across London, screech overhead, improbable and tropical in this decidedly non-tropical setting. Regent's Park to the north continues the theme, but adds the zoo. The London Zoo, opened in 1828, occupies the northern end of the park, and while most of its animals are now kept in controlled environments, the zoo's presence connects modern London to that earlier impulse to collect and display nature, to bring the exotic to the metropolis. Regent's Park itself, designed by John Nash in the early 19th century, was conceived as a pastoral retreat within the city, a place where wealthy Londoners could enjoy villa living with urban convenience. The villas mostly vanished, but the park remained, its planned landscapes and formal gardens giving way to more natural areas where people sprawl on grass in summer, where impromptu football games happen, where you can lie on your back and watch clouds without any building interrupting your view. Further out, the parks grow wilder. Richmond Park, the largest of the royal parks, covers nearly 2,500 acres and feels genuinely wild. Red and fallow deer roam freely, about 600 of them, descendants of herds that Charles I enclosed here in the 17th century for hunting. They're habituated to people but remain wild animals, unpredictable and potentially dangerous during rutting season when stags battle for dominance. Walk through Richmond Park in autumn, early morning when mist rises from the grass and the bellowing of stags echoes across the landscape, and you could be in the countryside, miles from anywhere, not in Greater London with the city visible in the distance. Hampstead Heath to the north offers different wildness, wilder, somehow, less managed. The heath covers 800 acres of woodland, meadow, and ponds, and it resisted development through a combination of public campaign and Victorian Enlightenment. The Metropolitan Board of Works purchased it in 1871 to preserve it as public open space, and subsequent additions have expanded it into one of London's most loved landscapes. The heath has swimming ponds, separate ones for men, women, and mixed bathing, fed by springs and maintained as natural as possible, allowing hardy souls to swim outdoors year-round in water that ranges from refreshing to punishing depending on season. Parliament Hill, the heath's highest point, offers views across London that make the green space argument visible. From here, you can see how much of London is actually green, how the city isn't a solid mass of buildings but a network of development threaded through with parks and gardens and tree-lined streets. The view takes in central London's towers and St. Paul's Dome, one of those protected sight lines we discussed earlier, but it also reveals the tree canopy, the parks, the green that persists despite everything. The commons add another layer: Clapham Common, Tooting Common, Wandsworth Common, Wimbledon Common. These are remnants of the medieval commons where locals had grazing rights, land that was never enclosed, never privatized, that remained public through custom and eventually through law. They're scruffier than the royal parks, less manicured, more democratic. People walk dogs here, play sports, have barbecues when the weather permits. The commons feel used rather than preserved, loved through wear rather than protection. And then there are the gardens, not public parks but the private and semi-private green spaces that dot London. The garden squares of Bloomsbury and other residential areas, enclosed by iron railings, accessible usually only to residents of the surrounding houses. These create oases of green throughout central London, each one a small park that contributes to the overall greenness even if most people can't access them. From above, from a high building or an aircraft, London's garden squares reveal themselves as a network of hidden green spaces, each one maintaining its own microclimate, its own population of birds and insects and plants. The Thames corridor provides linear green space, the riverside paths and parks that follow the river, creating a green thread through London. We've already discussed the river's wildlife, but the land along it adds to the green network. Battersea Park on the south bank, with its Victorian landscaping and boating lake. The Thames Path, which you can follow from the source to the sea, running through central London with remarkable continuity, giving access to the river and creating habitat corridors for wildlife moving through the city. The canals contribute too: Regent's Canal, the Grand Union Canal, miles of waterways that were built for industrial transport and now serve mostly for recreation, their towpaths lined with trees, their waters inhabited by ducks and moorhens and occasionally herons, their banks providing narrow strips of wildlife habitat cutting through residential areas. Walk the Regent's Canal from Little Venice to Limehouse and you're navigating London through an entirely different geography, a water-level view where the city's green nature is more visible because you're passing through its edges and backs rather than its fronts. London's tree canopy deserves particular attention. Those 8 million trees aren't distributed evenly. Some boroughs are much greener than others, but collectively they create what urban foresters classify as an urban forest. The trees provide ecosystem services. They absorb carbon dioxide, produce oxygen, filter air pollution, provide cooling through transpiration and shade, reduce stormwater runoff, support biodiversity. They also provide beauty, seasonal change, and connection to natural cycles that purely built environments lack. The London plane tree, Platanus times acerifolia, dominates many streets. It's a hybrid, probably originating in 17th century Europe, that proved remarkably tolerant of urban pollution and compact soil. The planes shed their bark in irregular patches, creating camouflage patterns, and this bark shedding helps them shed accumulated pollution, allowing them to thrive in conditions that would kill many other species. Victorian planters favored them, and they now line thousands of London streets, growing to enormous size, their canopies meeting overhead to create green tunnels in summer. But there's diversity too. Oaks and limes, cherries that explode into blossom each spring, creating brief moments of pink and white beauty. Horse chestnuts producing conkers that children collect and play with in autumn. Street trees and park trees, ancient specimens and recent plantings, all contributing to the canopy, all making London greener than its reputation suggests. The wildlife follows the green. We mentioned foxes, but there are badgers in some parks, hedgehogs in gardens, though declining unfortunately, gray squirrels everywhere, invasive technically, but so established that they're essentially naturalized. The bird diversity is remarkable for an urban area. Over 130 species recorded breeding in London, including kestrels that hunt along railway embankments, peregrines nesting on tall buildings and hunting the feral pigeons, tawny owls calling in suburban gardens, kingfishers along the quieter stretches of rivers and canals. The parakeets remain gloriously implausible, wild parrots in London, thriving despite winters that should theoretically kill them, establishing populations that now number in the tens of thousands. Nobody quite knows how they got established. Various origin stories circulate: escaped from aviaries during the 1987 storm, released from Shepperton Studios during filming of The African Queen, or simply accumulated escapes from the pet trade reaching critical mass. Whatever the truth, they're here now, resident and breeding, adding unexpected color and noise to London's avifauna. Green roofs and vertical gardens add new dimensions to London's green space. The pressure to develop, to accommodate more housing and office space, runs up against the desire to maintain greenness. The solution, increasingly, is to go vertical, to plant on roofs, to create green walls, to use the three-dimensional space of buildings to add vegetation. These installations provide some of the benefits of ground-level green space: insulation, stormwater management, habitat for insects and birds, aesthetic value. They also represent a different relationship with nature, more designed, more intentional, nature as something to be engineered rather than preserved. Climate change makes London's green space increasingly important. Trees provide cooling during heat waves, which are becoming more frequent and intense. Green space absorbs rainfall that would otherwise overwhelm storm drains. Parks provide refuge during extreme weather. The environmental services that London's green infrastructure provides will become more critical as the climate shifts, making the preservation and expansion of green space not just aesthetic or recreational but essential for the city's resilience. Evening settles over the city, and in Richmond Park, the deer move from their daytime resting places toward the areas where they graze. In Hyde Park, a heron stands motionless in the Serpentine shallows, waiting for a fish. On Hampstead Heath, walkers climb Parliament Hill to watch the sunset over London, the city spreading below them, its lights beginning to twinkle, its greenness less visible now but still present, still there in the dark masses of parks and gardens and tree-lined streets. London shouldn't be this green. A megacity, a global financial capital, one of the world's largest metropolitan areas, it should be concrete and steel, buildings and pavement, nature banished to the periphery. That's the expectation, the assumption about what cities are and how they function. But London defies that expectation. Through historical accident and careful preservation, through the persistence of commons and the creation of parks, through millions of private gardens and 8 million trees, through foxes and parakeets and deer and herons, London has remained, remarkably, significantly, an urban forest. Not pristine, not wilderness, but genuinely green, genuinely diverse, genuinely alive with non-human nature. Walk through any London borough, and you'll find green space within reach. Perhaps not enough, some areas are park poor, and environmental justice demands better distribution of access to nature, but present, persistent, protected. The green threads through the city, connects it, provides continuity with the landscape that existed before buildings, that will exist again if buildings should ever fall. The trees grow. The foxes hunt. The Thames flows with its returning wildlife. And London, that ancient human settlement that grew into a global megacity, remains rooted in and threaded through with the green world that preceded it and continues alongside it, patient and persistent as the river, as the clay beneath the streets, as the deep history that makes London what it is. A city in a forest. A forest in a city. The distinction blurs on summer evenings when tree cover is so complete you can walk beneath canopy for streets at a time, when parks are full and gardens bloom and the boundary between urban and natural becomes negotiable, provisional, something to be continually renegotiated rather than permanently fixed. This is London too, green and growing, wild and managed, natural and urban all at once, defying categories and expectations, proving that cities need not banish nature but can embrace it, accommodate it, benefit from it. The urban forest endures, an unexpected gift from past generations to present ones, a legacy worth preserving for future Londoners who will need its shade, its beauty, its wildlife, its reminder that humans aren't the only species that can call this city home. The Blue Plaque City. Walk through any London neighbourhood and you'll see them, small blue circles mounted on building facades, each one marking a life that intersected with that place. Charles Dickens lived here. Virginia Woolf lived here. Jimi Hendrix lived here. Over 900 of these plaques now London streets, a distributed memorial to the famous and the influential, turning the entire city into a museum without walls where history isn't locked behind glass but embedded in the fabric of everyday life. The Blue Plaque scheme began in 1866, making it the oldest of its kind in the world. The Royal Society of Art started it, driven by the very Victorian conviction that education could be woven into daily experience, that walking past the house where Byron lived or Faraday experimented might inspire or instruct or simply remind passers-by that history happened here, in these ordinary buildings, in this extraordinary city. English Heritage administers the scheme now, carefully selecting who gets commemorated according to strict criteria. They must have been dead for 20 years, must have made an important positive contribution to human welfare, must have lived or worked at the location for a significant period. The plaques democratize memory in a peculiar way. A blue plaque for Karl Marx carries the same visual weight as one for Sylvia Pankhurst or Lord Byron or Marie Lloyd. The scheme doesn't judge the relative importance of contributions. Science, literature, politics, entertainment, reform, all are equally commemorated. The message is simply, this person mattered, they were here, remember them. Stand outside 23, Brook Street in Mayfair and you'll find two plaques side by side, an accidental conjunction of musical genius. One commemorates Jimi Hendrix, who lived in the top-floor flat in 1968–69. The other marks George Friedel Handel, who lived in the house next door from 1723 until his death in 1759. Two musicians, separated by centuries and genres but connected by geography, by the simple fact that they both found something in this particular London street that suited their needs. The building is now the Handel and Hendrix Museum, celebrating both, acknowledging that greatness doesn't diminish greatness, that London is large enough to contain multitudes. But the blue plaques are only the most visible layer of how London remembers. The city's museum culture represents something more ambitious, the conviction that cultural heritage should be accessible to everyone, not gate-kept by admission fees or social class. In 2001, the government made admission to the major national museums and galleries free. It wasn't universally popular, some worried about revenue, about maintenance, about crowding, but it transformed cultural access. Today you can walk into the British Museum, the Natural History Museum, the Science Museum, the Victoria and Albert Museum, the National Gallery, the Tate Galleries, without paying a penny. The collections that were assembled by empire and philanthropy, by royal gift and parliamentary purchase, became genuinely public in a way they hadn't quite been before. The British Museum alone attracts nearly 6 million visitors annually, making it one of the most visited museums in the world. Its collection spans 2 million years of human history, from Stone Age tools to contemporary artifacts, from every inhabited continent. The controversies around some acquisitions, the Parthenon marbles being the most famous, remain unresolved, complex arguments about ownership and heritage that won't be settled easily or soon. But whatever your position on these debates, the fact remains, you can walk in off the street and see the Rosetta Stone, examine Assyrian lion hunts carved in stone, stand before the Lewis chessmen, all without paying anything beyond the taxes that fund the institution. The Natural History Museum offers different wonders. The central hall, dominated by the skeleton of a blue whale suspended from the ceiling, replaced the beloved Diplodocus cast that had greeted visitors for generations. The change was controversial. Londoners form attachments to museum exhibits the way others form attachments to landmarks, but the blue whale, named Hope, serves its purpose, reminding visitors of the ocean's vastness and vulnerability, of nature's scale and fragility. Children crowd the dinosaur galleries, faces pressed to displays, absorbing information about creatures that ruled Earth for 165 million years before vanishing. The museum doesn't just display extinct animals, it's actively involved in understanding extinction, in documenting biodiversity, in studying climate change and species loss. The building itself, Alfred Waterhouse's Romanesque Cathedral to Nature, opened in 1881, represents Victorian certainty about science's power to explain and classify the world. Walk through it today and you're navigating both the confidence of that Victorian moment and the anxieties of our own, when we understand how much we're losing even as we catalogue it. The Victoria and Albert Museum celebrates human creativity, art and design from every culture, ceramics and textiles, furniture and jewelry, fashion and photography. Its collections are encyclopedic and occasionally overwhelming. You could spend days there and still not see everything. But you can also drop in for half an hour, see a specific exhibition, sit in the courtyard cafe, and leave, all without cost. This casual accessibility matters. Museums become not destinations requiring planning and expense but resources available whenever curiosity strikes. The Science Museum next door charts technological progress and its consequences. Early steam engines sit alongside contemporary artificial intelligence exhibits. The pattern-making jacquard looms that inspired early computing share space with actual Apollo mission hardware. It's a narrative of human ingenuity and its costs, celebration and caution existing simultaneously. But London's cultural memory isn't only preserved in grand institutions. It lives in the pubs, those social institutions that have survived centuries of change by adapting while maintaining their essential character. The ye old Cheshire Cheese on Fleet Street dates back, in its current building, to 1667, though there's been a pub on the site since 1538. It's a warren of rooms on multiple levels, dark wood and low ceilings, the kind of place where you can imagine Samuel Johnson drinking, because he did drink there, along with Dickens and Yeats and countless other literary figures drawn to Fleet Street when it was the center of British journalism. Sit in the Cheshire Cheese with a pint, and you're occupying the same space, experiencing something fundamentally similar to what people experienced 3 centuries ago. The beer's better now probably, and the lighting is electric rather than candles, but the essential experience, gathering in a public house to drink and talk, remains unchanged. The prospect of Whitby in Wapping, claiming to be London's oldest riverside pub, opened in 1520. Its location on the Thames made it popular with sailors and dockers, with smugglers and river traders. Turner supposedly came here to paint the river. Pepys mentioned it in his diary. The gallows that once stood nearby, Execution Dock, where pirates were hanged, are gone, but the pub remains, serving modern patrons in a building that has watched the Thames for 5 centuries. London has thousands of pubs, and while not all are historic, many carry stories worth preserving. The Mayflower in Rotherhithe, from which the Pilgrim Fathers departed. The Spaniards in near Hampstead Heath, supposedly haunted and definitely atmospheric. The George Inn in Southwark, London's only surviving galleried coaching inn, owned by the National Trust and operated as a working pub. These aren't museum pieces, they're functioning businesses that happen to be historic, places where you can have a drink and a meal while literally surrounded by centuries. The markets tell similar stories of continuity and adaptation. Borough Market, near London Bridge, has been a food market for over 1,000 years. The current structures are Victorian, but the market predates them by centuries, mentioned in documents from 1014. Today it's become fashionable, almost touristy, with artisanal producers and expensive specialty foods, but it's still fundamentally a market, still serving the same basic function it has for a millennium, connecting people who grow or make food with people who want to buy it. Smithfield Market, London's last remaining wholesale meat market, operates from Victorian buildings that hide the market's deeper history. There's been a livestock market here since the 12th century, possibly longer. The current Victorian halls, opened in 1868, are magnificent, cast iron and glass, designed with the same architectural ambition that created railway stations and exhibition halls. But they serve a blunt purpose, the wholesale distribution of meat, continuing a trade that has happened on this site for at least 800 years. The market operates through the night. Animals aren't slaughtered here anymore, but meat is delivered, sold, and distributed to butchers and restaurants across London. Visit at 3 a.m. and you'll find it bustling, porters moving carcasses on hooks, traders negotiating prices, the work of feeding London happening while most of the city sleeps. It's functional, not picturesque, though the Victorian architecture adds grandeur to what is essentially an industrial operation. Both Borough and Smithfield face uncertain futures. Property pressure, changing food distribution systems, and the complexity of operating historic buildings for modern purposes create challenges. Borough has gentrified, which saved it but changed its character. Smithfield may relocate, may be redeveloped, may cease to be a working market. London's heritage is always negotiating with London's present, and the outcomes aren't predetermined. The same tension affects historic pubs. Many have closed, converted to other uses or demolished entirely, victims of changing drinking habits, rising property values, and corporate consolidation. Each closure erases a small piece of social history, a gathering place that might have been serving the community for centuries. Heritage designation protects some, but not all, and protection doesn't guarantee continued use as a pub. A listed building can be repurposed while keeping the historic fabric intact. Yet the impulse to preserve persists. English Heritage and the National Trust, between them, protect thousands of historic sites. Local historical societies document neighbourhood histories. Archives collect photographs and documents. The Museum of London chronicles the city's entire history from prehistory to present, while the Museum of London Docklands tells the specific story of the river and its trade. These institutions provide context, help Londoners and visitors understand how the present grew from the past. The National Portrait Gallery approaches history through faces. Its collection includes portraits of everyone who mattered in British history: monarchs and ministers, artists and scientists, rebels and reformers. Stand before the Chandos portrait, possibly of Shakespeare, the identification isn't certain, and you're confronting the face that might be the most influential writer in English. Move through the galleries chronologically and you're walking through history, seeing how people presented themselves across centuries, how ideas about power and beauty and significance changed. The Jeffrey Museum, recently renamed the Museum of the Home, takes a different approach, recreating domestic interiors from different periods. You can see how ordinary Londoners lived, how their homes were furnished, how daily life looked across 4 centuries. It's social history rather than political history, interested in domesticity and design rather than great events and famous people. Free admission to these institutions matters profoundly. It removes a barrier, makes a statement that culture belongs to everyone, not just those who can afford entry fees. A family can visit repeatedly without financial stress. A curious individual can drop in regularly, developing deep familiarity with collections. Students can study original works without institutional affiliation. The principle is democratic in the deepest sense. These are public resources, held in trust, accessible to the public. Of course, free isn't quite accurate. Taxpayers fund these institutions through direct grants and indirect support. But the funding is collective and the access is universal, which distributes cost while concentrating benefit. Everyone pays a tiny amount, everyone can receive enormous value. Evening falls, and the museums begin closing, guards politely herding the last visitors toward exits. The blue plaques remain visible in street lamplight, continuing their quiet work of commemoration. The pubs fill with after-work crowds, continuing their ancient function of providing third places, spaces that are neither home nor work but somewhere else, public but intimate, ancient but contemporary. London's cultural heritage isn't trapped in the past. It's not preserved in amber, unchanging and dead. Instead, it's active, working, constantly reinterpreted and reused. The blue plaques add new names every year. The museums acquire new objects, mount new exhibitions, respond to new scholarship and changing public interests. The pubs adapt to new regulations and customer preferences while maintaining their essential character. The markets evolve, survive, sometimes close, sometimes reinvent themselves. This is how London remembers, not by freezing the past but by keeping it accessible, keeping it relevant, allowing each generation to engage with history on its own terms while preserving enough of the actual fabric, the buildings, the objects, the places, that the past remains tangible, touchable, real. Walk through London and you're walking through time, through layers of memory made physical. The blue plaque marks where Keats lived. The pub serves pints in rooms where journalists plotted stories centuries ago. The museum holds objects that span human history, all free to examine. The market continues trading on ground that has been a market for 1,000 years. Memory, in London, isn't abstract. It's embedded in streets and buildings, preserved in institutions and traditions, marked by plaques and protected by law. The past persists not because London is trapped in nostalgia, but because the past is useful, instructive, beautiful, worth preserving and engaging with. The city contains multitudes, and it remembers them. The famous and the forgotten, the powerful and the ordinary, the triumphs and the tragedies, all are written into London's fabric, waiting to be read by anyone curious enough to look, accessible to anyone willing to engage. That's the gift of London's cultural heritage. It's democratic, distributed, woven so thoroughly into the city that you can't avoid encountering it, can't walk through London without brushing against history, without being reminded that this place has been meaningful to people for 2 millennia, and their lives and works and memories deserve acknowledgement. The blue plaques dot the streets. The museums stand open. The pubs pour their pints. And London remembers, actively and constantly, ensuring that the past remains present, remains accessible, remains part of the conversation about what this city is and what it might become. The city of ghosts and ceremonies. Every night, just before the Tower of London closes, a ceremony takes place that has been performed, with only brief interruptions for war and plague, for over 700 years. The chief yeoman warder, dressed in Tudor uniform, carrying a lantern and the Queen's keys, proceeds with an escort to lock the gates of the fortress. As they return, a sentry challenges them, "Halt! Who comes there?" The chief warder replies, "The keys." "Whose keys?" "King Charles's keys." "Pass King Charles's keys. All's well." The last post sounds, and the tower is secured for the night. It's pure theater, of course, a performance of security rather than actual security. The tower's real protection comes from modern systems, not ceremonial key-turning. But the ceremony of the keys continues because London is a city where tradition and performance matter, where rituals persist long after their practical purpose has vanished, maintained simply because they've always been maintained, because continuity itself has value. The Tower of London has been performing continuity for nearly 1,000 years. William the Conqueror built the White Tower, the central keep, to dominate and intimidate London. Over centuries, it grew into a castle complex serving as royal residence, armory, treasury, and most famously, prison and execution site. 2 of Henry VIII's wives were beheaded here. The princes in the Tower, Edward V and his brother Richard, disappeared here in 1483, presumably murdered. Lady Jane Grey, the 9 Days Queen, lost her head on Tower Green. The Tower's history is written in blood, and Londoners have never forgotten it. The ghosts, people say, haven't forgotten either. The Tower claims to be the most haunted building in England, which is quite a claim in a country with no shortage of supposedly haunted locations. Anne Boleyn's ghost allegedly walks headless through the Tower, carrying her head under her arm or looking for it, depending on which account you believe. The princes are said to haunt the Bloody Tower. A phantom bear from the Tower's menagerie days supposedly terrified a guard in 1815. Visitors and staff report cold spots, unexplained sounds, the feeling of being watched. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, and Londoners themselves are divided on this, the stories serve a purpose. They keep history alive, make it visceral rather than abstract. The tale of Anne Boleyn's ghost is more memorable, more affecting, than merely noting that she was executed on May 19, 1536. The supernatural becomes a way of processing trauma, of acknowledging that terrible things happened here and their resonance persists. The Tower's ravens add another layer of superstition. Legend holds that if the ravens ever leave the Tower, the kingdom will fall. So the ravens are kept, their wings clipped to ensure they stay, fed and tended by the Raven Master, currently Yeoman Warder Christopher Scaife, who has written books about his charges and their personalities. There are usually 7 ravens, 6 required by tradition, plus 1 spare, and each has a name. They're intelligent, occasionally mischievous, and absolutely integral to the Tower's identity. The legend is probably Victorian invention, but it's been repeated long enough to feel ancient, and in Britain, where the monarchy's legitimacy rests partly on tradition, even invented traditions acquire weight. Underground London has its own ghosts, its own abandoned spaces that feel haunted whether they contain actual spirits or not. The ghost stations, disused underground stations scattered across the network, create their own mythology. Aldwych, which we've mentioned before, closed in 1994 and feels frozen in time, its wartime posters still on the walls. Down Street, abandoned since 1932, served as Churchill's wartime headquarters before the cabinet war rooms were fully operational. These stations exist in a strange liminal state, not destroyed, not active, just waiting in darkness while trains rush past. British Museum Station, closed since 1933, allegedly has a particularly persistent ghost, an Egyptian princess whose mummy, disturbed from its eternal rest, cursed the station. Staff reported hearing screams and seeing an apparition in Egyptian headdress. The story is almost certainly false. There's no evidence any such mummy was ever displayed at the British Museum Station, but it spread anyway, amplified by the horror-friendly setting of an abandoned underground station. The darkness beneath London invites such stories, demands them almost. But London's traditions aren't all supernatural or solemn. Many are simply, gloriously, eccentric. Every Shrove Tuesday, the Liberal Democrats hold a pancake race in Guildhall Yard. Participants, typically politicians, though others can enter, run while flipping pancakes in frying pans. It's undignified, slightly absurd, and completely English. The tradition supposedly dates to 1445, when a housewife in Olney, Buckinghamshire, hearing the church bells while making pancakes, ran to church still holding her frying pan. Whether the story is true or not, pancake racing became a thing, and London embraced it. At Great Spitalfields Pancake Race, teams compete in costumes, flipping pancakes while navigating an obstacle course. It serves no purpose beyond entertainment and maintaining a connection to Shrovetide traditions, to the last indulgent meal before Lent's austerity. The pearly kings and queens represent working-class London's own aristocracy. The tradition began in the 1870s with Henry Croft, an orphanage sweeper who decorated his suit with pearl buttons and collected money for charity. The covered button suits, pearlies, became associated with London's costermongers, the street sellers who formed their own tight-knit community. Today, pearly families maintain the tradition, each London borough having its own pearly king and queen, their elaborate suits covered with thousands of mother-of-pearl buttons arranged in intricate patterns. They appear at charity events, festivals, and ceremonies, ambassadors of Cockney culture, preserving a tradition that celebrates working-class pride and community solidarity. The pearlies embody something essential about London's relationship with tradition. It doesn't all come from aristocracy or ancient ceremony. Working people create their own rituals, their own pageantry, their own ways of marking importance and building community. The pearly suits are as elaborate as any royal regalia, the ceremonies as carefully maintained, the sense of continuity as strong. Jack in the Green, celebrated on May Day, reaches further back, to pre-Christian spring festivals. The Jack is a person completely covered in a framework of leaves and flowers, becoming a walking tree, representing nature's renewal. The tradition died out in the early 20th century but was revived in the 1980s in Hastings and now in various locations including London. The revival is conscious, knowing, modern pagans and folklorists deliberately bringing back something that had been lost. But the need it fills is genuine, the desire to mark seasonal change, to celebrate spring's arrival, to maintain connection with agricultural cycles even in an utterly urban environment. Every January, the Bankside area near Shakespeare's Globe celebrates Twelfth Night with Holly Man Procession. A performer covered in holly represents winter, processioning through the streets before being symbolically defeated, allowing spring to begin its approach. Again, it's revived tradition, based on historical research and contemporary need, but it connects Londoners to seasonal rhythms, to the turning year, to something older than the city itself. The Clown's Church service happens annually at Holy Trinity Church in Dalston, where Joseph Grimaldi, the father of modern clowning, is buried. Clowns gather in full costume and makeup for a church service celebrating their profession. It's poignant and slightly surreal, professional comedians, accustomed to provoking laughter, sitting solemnly in pews wearing grease paint and red noses, honoring their patron and their tradition. Grimaldi transformed pantomime in the early 19th century, creating the clown character that influenced circus and performance art. The service maintains his memory while affirming that clowning is a serious profession, a calling worthy of ceremony and respect. These traditions, supernatural and secular, ancient and revived, serious and absurd, serve multiple purposes. They provide continuity with the past, creating a sense that London today connects to London of centuries ago. They mark time, seasonal and historical. They build community, giving people shared experiences and stories. And they add character, making London distinctive, giving it personality beyond its function as political capital and financial center. But they also reveal something about how Londoners see themselves. The British, and Londoners particularly, maintain a complicated relationship with ceremony and tradition. They're simultaneously reverent and irreverent, capable of treating ancient rituals with deadly seriousness while also being willing to race through streets flipping pancakes. The monarchy is respected but also gently mocked. The Tower's ceremonies are maintained precisely but also recognized as performance. London can be both solemn and silly, often simultaneously. This duality appears in how London treats its folklore. Ghost stories are told but not necessarily believed. The ravens at the Tower are tended carefully, but everyone knows the legend is probably invented. The traditions are maintained, but with a knowing wink, an acknowledgement that we're all participating in a kind of collective theater. The performance matters more than authenticity, the continuation more than the origin. Walk through London during Halloween, and you'll find ghost tours running in multiple locations: the Tower, the East End where Jack the Ripper prowled, underground Victorian burial sites. These tours occupy a space between history and entertainment, education and horror. Guides tell stories that mix documented fact with embellished legend, pointing out where murders occurred and where ghosts have been reported. The tours work because London provides the setting, the accumulated history and atmospheric locations that make the stories plausible, even compelling. The Theatre Royal Drury Lane claims to be home to several ghosts, including the Man in Grey, a phantom in 18th-century dress who allegedly brings good luck to productions. Actors and staff report encounters, sightings that persist despite changing casts and crews. Whether the ghost exists or not, the story persists, adding to the theatre's mystique, connecting current productions to centuries of theatrical history. The British Museum, despite its rational scientific mission, has its own supernatural tales. Staff have reported mysterious footsteps in empty galleries, exhibits that move overnight, the feeling of presence in rooms that should be deserted. Ancient artifacts from cultures worldwide sit in the museum's collections, some of them from burial contexts, some associated with religious or magical practices. Whether this creates actual supernatural phenomena or simply makes people more likely to interpret ordinary occurrences as supernatural is an open question. But the stories persist, whispered among staff, occasionally making it into newspapers when someone credible reports an experience they can't explain. Evening falls, and across London, traditions continue. The tower's keys turn in their ancient locks. Somewhere, a pearly family is preparing their button-covered suits for an upcoming appearance. A ghost tour group stands in a darkened alley while their guide recounts a Victorian murder. The ravens settle for the night in the tower, their wings clipped, ensuring the kingdom won't fall, at least not because of their departure. These rituals and stories, the ceremonies and the ghosts, the pancake races and the pearlies, the clowns in church and the Jack in the Green, they're what give London texture, what prevent it from being just another global city of glass towers and financial markets. They're evidence that human communities need more than efficiency and commerce, need ritual and story and connection to the past, need occasions to dress ridiculously and race while flipping pancakes, need to believe or half believe that the executed queens still walk the tower and the underground has its ghosts. London's eccentricity is deliberate. The city could have shed these traditions, dismissed them as antiquated or irrelevant. Some cities have done exactly that, modernizing completely, erasing their peculiarities in favor of sleek uniformity. But London keeps its ceremonies, maintains its ghost stories, encourages its pancake races and button-covered suits. Not out of backwardness but out of recognition that these things matter, that identity requires specificity, that being London means being slightly odd, slightly theatrical, comfortable with contradiction and complexity. Stand on Tower Bridge on a winter night, looking up at the tower's floodlit walls. Somewhere inside, Anne Boleyn's ghost may or may not be walking. The yeoman warders are certainly there, and tomorrow they'll perform their ceremonies for tourists who came to see exactly this: the costumes and rituals, the ravens and the crown jewels, the accumulated pageantry of 1,000 years. And that's fine. That's London. Ancient and modern, serious and silly, haunted and pragmatic, maintaining traditions that may be genuine or invented but are now, through sheer persistence, real in the way that matters most. They're believed in, participated in, continued. The ghosts walk, whether they exist or not. The ceremonies continue, whether they're necessary or not. The traditions persist, whether they're ancient or revived. And London remains itself, a city where folklore and modernity coexist comfortably, where you can commute through ghost stations to reach a pancake race, where pearly kings and queens preserve working-class traditions while international bankers trade trillions. The city contains multitudes, and it honors them all, the historical and the eccentric, the solemn and the absurd, the documented and the legendary. That's what makes it London, what gives it character beyond architecture and infrastructure, what ensures that 2,000 years of human occupation have created not just a city but a story, still being told, still being lived, still adding new chapters while carefully preserving the old ones. The keys turn. The ravens settle. The ghosts, if they exist, continue their eternal routines. And London carries on as it always has, honoring its past while living in its present, maintaining its traditions while creating new ones, being utterly itself in all its eccentric, contradictory, magnificent complexity. The global crossroads. If you stand at the center of Piccadilly Circus and close your eyes, the sound of London is not a singular roar, but a polyphonic broadcast. Beneath the hum of the red buses and the hiss of the rain on pavement, the air is thick with the cadence of 300 tongues. You might hear the staccato rhythm of Bengali, the melodic rise of Polish, the soft aspirations of Cantonese, or the vibrant energy of Yoruba. This is not a recent phenomenon, a modern overlay on an ancient city, but the very heartbeat of London's survival. For 2 millennia, London has been a city of elsewhere, a place where the world's paths cross, collide, and eventually weave into a single complex tapestry. London's story has always been written by those who arrived with nothing but a suitcase and a dream, or perhaps just the necessity of escape. From the Roman merchants who established Londinium as a trading outpost to the Huguenot silk weavers fleeing persecution in France, from the Jewish refugees of the 19th and 20th centuries to the Windrush generation arriving at Tilbury docks, migration is the engine of the city's constant reinvention. To be a Londoner has never been a matter of blood or ancient lineage. It is a matter of participation, an agreement to live within the city's restless, shifting boundaries. The geography of London is a map of global history. Walk through Brick Lane and you see the layers of arrival etched into the brickwork. The building at the corner of Fournier Street has served as a Huguenot chapel, a Methodist church, a Jewish synagogue, and now the Jam Masjid Mosque. It is a palimpsest of faith, each new community inheriting the walls of the last, finding sanctuary in the same space where predecessors once prayed for a better life. The smell of salt beef and bagels has given way to the scent of turmeric and cumin, but the essential character of the street remains unchanged. It is a portal, a first foothold in a new world. In Brixton, the murals and the markets pulse with the legacy of the Caribbean. When the HMT Empire Windrush docked in 1948, it brought more than just labor to a post-war city in need of rebuilding. It brought a radical shift in the city's soul. The influence of the Caribbean is not merely a contribution to London, it is now inseparable from it. It is in the bass-heavy vibrations of a passing car, the vocabulary of the city's youth, and the uncompromising vibrancy of the Notting Hill Carnival. The Carnival, born in 1966 as a response to racial tension and a yearning for community, has grown into Europe's largest street party. For 2 days in August, the elegant stucco-fronted terraces of West London are transformed into a riot of colour, sound and movement. It is a spectacle of defiance and joy, where the rigid Victorian grid of the neighbourhood is momentarily dissolved by the flow of steel pans and masquerade. 2 million people dance in the streets, a mass of humanity that transcends origin, proving that London is at its most authentic when it is at its most diverse. The Carnival is a reminder that culture is not something to be preserved in a museum, but something to be performed, sweated, and shared. This diversity is most tangibly felt and tasted in the city's extraordinary food culture. London was once a city of grey-boiled meats and institutional puddings, a place where foreign food was a rare curiosity. Today, it is arguably the culinary capital of the world, not because of its Michelin stars, but because of its neighborhood cafes. You can eat breakfast in a Turkish Mongol in Dalston, lunch at a Vietnamese pho cafe in Kingsland Road, and dinner at a West African suya spot in Peckham. The city's markets have evolved to reflect this appetite for the world. At Ridley Road Market or Shepherd's Bush, you find plantains alongside parsnips, Scotch bonnet peppers next to English apples. These markets are the front lines of integration, places where grandmothers from different continents haggle over the price of fish, sharing a common language of commerce and survival. The Sunday roast remains a staple, but it now exists alongside the Sunday dim sum in Chinatown or the weekend curry in Southall. This is how London absorbs the world, through the stomach, through the shared experience of a meal, turning the exotic into the everyday. The creativity of London, its music, its fashion, its art, is the direct result of this friction between cultures. The London look is rarely a product of a single heritage. It is the spark that flies when different traditions rub against one another in a crowded council estate or a shared studio space. Grime music, a uniquely London genre, was born from the intersection of Jamaican sound system culture, electronic dance music, and the lived reality of urban migration. It is the sound of the city speaking to itself, a raw, unfiltered expression of a generation that is British by birth but global by perspective. Yet, this diversity is not without its tensions. The history of migration in London is also a history of struggle, of no dogs, no Irish, no black signs, of the Battle of Cable Street, and the Brixton riots. The city does not always welcome its newcomers with open arms. There is a recurring cycle of anxiety, a fear that the essential character of London is being lost to the tide of the new. But the irony of London is that the new always becomes the essential. The Jewish tailor of the 1920s becomes the quintessential London figure, just as the Bangladeshi restaurateur or the Nigerian barrister does today. London's global influence is not derived from its military might or its former empire, but from its status as a world city, a place where the globe's problems and possibilities are concentrated in a few square miles. It is a laboratory of human coexistence. In a world increasingly defined by borders and walls, London remains a porous entity. It is a city that belongs to no one and everyone, a place where you can be a Londoner on your first day, provided you can navigate the tube and find a place to belong. The 300 languages spoken in the city are not barriers to communication. They are a collective library of human experience. Every language carries a different way of seeing the world, a different set of metaphors for love, grief, and ambition. When these languages interact, they create a linguistic environment that is uniquely flexible and resilient. The English spoken in London today, multicultural London English, is a hybrid, a linguistic sponge that has soaked up influences from across the Commonwealth and beyond. It is a living thing, growing and changing as quickly as the city itself. As evening settles over the city, the lights of the skyscrapers in the city and Canary Wharf blink on, marking the centers of global finance. But the real power of London lies elsewhere, in the lit windows of 1,000 terraced houses where families are speaking a dozen different languages over dinner. It is in the community centers where ESOL classes are taught, in the backrooms of shops where new businesses are being planned, and in the clubs where the next global sound is being forged. London is a city of ghosts, as we have seen, but those ghosts are increasingly diverse. The Roman centurion, the Victorian clerk, and the Windrush immigrant now walk the same streets in the collective memory of the city. They are all part of the same long line of people who looked at the grey smudge of the London skyline and saw a place of opportunity. The blue plaques we observed in earlier chapters will, in 20 years, bear names that reflect this current era of migration. They will commemorate scientists from Mumbai, writers from Lagos, and artists from Warsaw who made London their home and in doing so, changed the world. The important positive contribution to human welfare, required by English heritage, is being made every day by those who have traveled thousands of miles to be here. London's character is not a fixed point, it is a process. It is the result of 1 million daily negotiations between people who have different histories but a shared present. It is the city of the global meeting point, the crossroads where the world comes to see what humanity looks like when it is forced to live together in a crowded, rainy, magnificent mess. The city of multitudes is not just a poetic phrase, it is a demographic reality. London remembers its past, but it breathes its present, a present that is vibrantly, unapologetically international. To walk through London is to walk through the world, a journey that requires no passport, only a sense of curiosity and an acceptance that the person standing next to you, speaking a language you do not understand, is just as much a Londoner as the king in his palace or the ghost in the tower. The city carries on, its boundaries stretching to accommodate the next wave of arrivals, its heart beating to the rhythm of 300 tongues, its soul forever shaped by the simple, profound act of people coming together from everywhere to build a home in this extraordinary, welcoming, ever-changing place. The arena of the world. If the museums of London are its memory and the pubs its soul, then its stadiums are its lungs, vast, echoing chambers where the city breathes in unison, exhaling a collective roar that can be heard from the leafy suburbs of Middlesex to the marshlands of the estuary. London does not merely play sports, it hosts the world's dramas. It is a city of grass and clay, of floodlights and finish lines, a place where the pursuit of physical excellence has, over centuries, become inextricably linked with the pursuit of national identity and global prestige. To understand London's relationship with the spectacle, one must look at its unique status as the only city to have hosted the Summer Olympic Games 3 times, in 1908, 1948, and 2012. Each iteration arrived at a pivotal moment in the city's biography, serving as a mirror to its contemporary anxieties and its shifting ambitions. In 1908, the Games were an expression of Edwardian confidence, a sprawling display of imperial reach held in the purpose-built White City. In 1948, the Austerity Games were something else entirely, a stoic, defiant gesture of recovery for a city still scarred by the Blitz and rationed by necessity. There were no new stadiums built, athletes were housed in schoolrooms and military barracks, and they brought their own food. It was a moment where the spectacle was not about opulence, but about the endurance of the human spirit and the restoration of international community after a decade of darkness. By 2012, however, the Olympics had become a tool for something more physical and permanent: urban regeneration. The transformation of Stratford, a pocket of East London previously defined by industrial decay and neglected waterways, into the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park was a feat of architectural alchemy. The city used the global stage to pivot its entire center of gravity eastward. What was once a landscape of scrap heaps became a parkland of wetlands and world-class arenas. Today, the legacy is not just in the medals won, but in the thousands of homes and the new cultural quarter, the East Bank, that rose from the dust of the podiums. The Games were the catalyst, but the city was the true prize. This pattern of regeneration through sport is most visible in the soaring arch of Wembley Stadium. The original Twin Towers, built for the 1924 British Empire exhibition, were for decades the most recognizable landmarks of the English game. They were the cathedral of football, a place of pilgrimage for fans from every corner of the country. When the old stadium was demolished and replaced by the current structure with its iconic 133-meter arch, it signaled a new era of the spectacle, one where the stadium itself is a piece of high-tech sculpture, visible for miles across the London skyline. Wembley remains the ultimate stage, a place where the weight of history, the ghost of 1966, the echoes of Live Aid, presses down on the turf, reminding every player and performer that they are standing in a space where legends are minted. While Wembley is the temple of the masses, Lord's Cricket Ground in St. John's Wood is the sanctuary of tradition. Established in 1814, Lord's is often called the home of cricket, and it maintains an atmosphere of quiet, almost liturgical reverence. The Grade II listed pavilion, with its long room lined with oil paintings of the game's greats, stands in stark contrast to the futuristic, pod-like J.P. Morgan Media Centre that sits opposite it. This is London in microcosm, the ancient and the avant-garde facing each other across a manicured lawn. At Lord's, the ritual is as important as the result. The ringing of the 5-minute bell, the strict dress codes, and the hushed anticipation of a test match are ceremonies that have survived 2 centuries. Here, sport is not just a game, it is a repository of a specific kind of Englishness, measured, patient, and deeply rooted in the continuity of the past. But London's sporting identity is not confined within walls or behind ticket barriers. Every April, the city itself becomes the stadium during the London Marathon. Since its inception in 1981, the race has grown into one of the world's great democratic spectacles. The course is a 42-kilometre tour of London's history, beginning in the maritime grandeur of Greenwich, crossing the spectacular span of Tower Bridge, winding through the glass canyons of Canary Wharf, and finishing on the Mall beneath the gaze of Buckingham Palace. The marathon is perhaps the most visceral expression of the city of multitudes. It is a day when the professional elite and the charitable eccentric occupy the same space. You might see a world record holder sprinting past the Tower of London, followed minutes later by a man in a deep-sea diving suit or a group of nurses running for their hospital. It is a mass movement of human empathy, a day when the streets are reclaimed from traffic and given over to a collective effort of endurance and philanthropy. The marathon turns the city into a theatre of the ordinary hero, proving that London's greatest spectacles are those in which its citizens are the performers. This global stage carries a significant weight of soft power. When London hosts the Wimbledon Championships, the eyes of the world turn to a quiet corner of SW19. For 2 weeks, the city defines a certain global aesthetic: strawberries and cream, green grass, white uniforms. It is an exercise in brand management that billions of dollars in advertising could not buy. It projects an image of London that is orderly, elegant, and timeless, even as the rest of the city churns with modern chaos. Yet, the spectacle city also faces the modern challenge of commercialization. The rising cost of tickets, the rebranding of historic grounds with corporate names, and the pressure of global broadcasting rights create a tension between the sport as a community asset and the sport as a luxury product. There is a fear that the soul of the game, whether it be football in Tottenham or cricket in Oval, is being priced out of reach for the very Londoners who created the culture in the first place. And yet, the impulse to gather remains undimmed. Whether it is a Sunday morning kickabout on Hackney Marshes, the spiritual home of grassroots football with its 88 pitches, or a sold-out final at the Emirates Stadium, the ritual of the match remains a vital social glue. Sport in London provides a shared vocabulary in a city of 300 languages. You may not be able to discuss politics or philosophy with your neighbor, but you can usually find common ground in the performance of the local team. As the sun sets over the city, the floodlights of the various stadiums flicker to life, casting a white-blue glow over the rooftops. In the pubs of Chelsea, Fulham and Stratford, the post-match post-mortem begins, a tradition of debate and camaraderie that is as old as the games themselves. The stadiums stand like silent giants during the week, but they are the anchors of their communities, physical landmarks that provide a sense of place and belonging in an often anonymous metropolis. The City of Ghosts also has its sporting spectres. There is the ghost of the old White City Stadium, now the site of the BBC Media Village, the vanished tracks of the great Victorian velodromes, and the memories of the 1966 World Cup final that still haunt the turf of Wembley. These stories are passed down through generations, becoming part of the folklore of the city. To be a Londoner is to carry these moments of collective triumph and heartbreak as part of one's personal history. London's role on the world stage is constantly being renegotiated. New events, the Formula E races around the Royal Docks, the NFL games at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, add new layers to the city's sporting tapestry. The city is a magpie, constantly attracting and absorbing new forms of spectacle, proving that it has the infrastructure, the history, and the appetite to host anything the world can conceive. In the end, the sporting life of London is about more than just points or trophies. It is about the distributed memorial of the city's communal life. It is the way a neighbourhood rallies around its colours, the way a grand project like the Olympics can heal a piece of broken land, and the way a simple race can turn a city of strangers into a cheering crowd. The medals of 2012 are now in cases or drawers, and the athletes of 1948 are mostly gone. But the arenas remain, and the rituals continue. The bell rings at Lord's, the whistle blows at Wembley, and the starter's gun fires in Greenwich. London remains the arena of the world, a city that understands that life is a spectacle, and that there is no better place to perform it than on the ancient, storied, and ever-regenerating streets of this extraordinary capital. The crowds disperse, the sirens of the departing trains wail into the night, and the stadiums fall dark. But the city is already looking toward the next season, the next race, the next global event, ready once again to open its gates and invite the world to come and play. The Traveller's Compass. To walk through London is to participate in a grand, ongoing conversation, but like any conversation, it has its own etiquette, its own rhythms, and its own unspoken rules. The city does not come with an instruction manual, yet it expects a certain degree of fluency from those who traverse its streets. Having explored the layers of history, the rituals of the Tower, and the polyphonic sounds of its migration, one must eventually face the practical reality of the pavement. For the visitor, the transition from observer to participant requires a shift in perspective, a move from the theoretical London to the tangible one. The city is a labyrinth, but it is a navigable one for those who understand that London is less a single monolith and more a collection of villages held together by a shared pulse. To move through it with grace is to honor the pace of its people while carving out space for one's own discovery. The rhythms of transit. The first lesson of London is one of motion. The Underground, that pipe of the city we have previously explored, operates on a choreography of efficiency. When descending into the earth, remember the cardinal rule of the Londoner's commute: stand on the right of the escalator. This simple act of spatial awareness allows the perpetual motion machines of the city, the workers, the hurried, the restless, to pass on the left. Once on the platform, that iconic haunting refrain, "Mind the gap," serves as both a practical warning and a quintessential London mantra, reminding you that in a city this old, the transition between where you stand and where you are going is rarely a seamless one. In this digital age, the physical ticket is a relic of the past. To navigate the tube, the buses, and the overground trains, one should adopt the Oyster card or utilize contactless payment. It is the currency of movement, significantly cheaper than the cumbersome single paper ticket, and a necessity for the buses, which have long since abandoned the exchange of physical cash. For the digital navigator, the TfL or Google Maps apps are indispensable, providing real-time updates on the city's shifting mechanical moods. Yet, there is a danger in spending too much of one's journey in the tunnels. To truly see London, one must rise above the clay. The top deck of a red bus or a hop-on hop-off tour offers a cinematic perspective that the underground denies. From the elevated vantage point of a bus window, the architectural layers of the city, the Victorian brick, the medieval stone, the modern glass, unfold at eye level. The art of the walk. Despite its sprawl, central London is surprisingly intimate. The map can be deceptive. Often, the distance between 2 points is shorter than the time it takes to descend into a station. The walk from Charing Cross to Covent Garden is a mere 10-minute stroll, a journey that reveals more theatres, hidden alleys, and flower stalls than any train ride could offer. To experience London, one must wear comfortable shoes and commit to the pavement. Walking is the only way to stumble upon the accidental conjunctions of the city. It is how you find the quiet canal-side paths of Little Venice, where the water reflects a side of London that feels more like Amsterdam than a bustling metropolis. It is how you scale the heights of Hampstead Heath, where the city's skyline is laid out like a toy set at your feet, or wander through the pastel-hued charm of Notting Hill. To maximize your time, group your explorations by neighbourhood. Spend a morning in the neon-lit rush of Soho before drifting into the scholarly quiet of Bloomsbury. By minimizing backtracking, you allow the city's narrative to remain coherent. The temporal city. London is a city of crowds, but it is also a city of quiet intervals. The seasoned traveler knows to visit major attractions in the early morning or near the closing hour. There is a particular magic to having a gallery in the British Museum or the National Gallery nearly to oneself, a moment where the dialogue between the viewer and the artifact becomes private once more. Remember that these grand institutions are free to enter, a gift of the city's democratic spirit that should be prioritized. For those sites that require a ticket, the Harry Potter studio tour or the latest West End triumph, the rule is simple: book months ahead. The world wants to see London, and the city's most popular stages are often spoken for long before the curtain rises. If you intend to see many of the paid landmarks, a London pass can offer a bundled reprieve for the wallet. Sustenance and survival. When the hunger of the city takes hold, look beyond the sterilized chains. The truest flavors of London are found in its outdoor markets and historic pubs. A food tour through the spice-scented air of Brick Lane or the culinary crossroads of Soho offers an authentic taste of the migration and diversity we have celebrated. These are the places where you can eat well without the formal price tag of a white linen restaurant. In your travels, carry a reusable water bottle. London's tap water is as safe as it is ancient, and free refills are becoming a modern tradition. For the practicalities of the body, public restrooms in stations or the reliable refuge of a pub, often for a small fee, are the navigator's silent friends. A place to rest. When choosing your base of operations, stay near a tube station in central hubs like King's Cross or Covent Garden. These are the nervous centers of the city, allowing you to reach any limb of the metropolis with ease. But because London is a destination for the world, accommodations fill with startling speed. To secure your place in the city's nightly rest, book early. Finally, do not be afraid to leave the center. The heart of London is magnificent, but its character is often found in the villages that ring the core. Take a River Thames cruise to see the Houses of Parliament and Tower Bridge from the water, the perspective of the Vikings and the merchants, and then let the tide carry you further. To visit London is to be a temporary custodian of its stories. By following these paths, By standing on the right and minding the gap, by walking the alleys and eating at the markets, you cease to be a mere spectator. You become, for a few days or weeks, a part of the city's living fabric, a new thread in the tapestry, contributing your own footsteps to the 2,000 years of movement that have made this city what it is. The perpetual city. We began this journey on the banks of a tidal river, standing where the Romans first drove wooden piles into the mud of the Thames. We have walked through the museum without walls, stood in the shadow of the tower's bloody history, heard the polyphonic chorus of 300 languages, and felt the earth shake beneath the feet of a marathon crowd. Now, as the narrative draws to a close, we find that London has no final chapter. It is a book that is being written in real time, its ink never quite drying before the next page is turned. To understand London is to accept that it is a city of and rather than or. It is ancient and avant-garde, it is a fortress of tradition and a laboratory of radical change, it is intensely local and unapologetically global. It is a place where a medieval church can be dwarfed by a glass skyscraper, and neither seems out of place because they are both held together by the same relentless energy. The city of ghosts we have explored is not a haunted place in the traditional sense, but a city that refuses to let go of its experiences. Every layer of history, from the soot of the Industrial Revolution to the neon glow of the digital age, is still present, if only you know where to look. The blue plaques continue to mark the walls, the ravens continue to watch the skies, and the Thames continues its indifferent rhythmic pulse, carrying the city's secrets out to sea. But London's true genius lies in its resilience. It has survived fires, plagues, and bombs, not by remaining stagnant, but by absorbing the trauma and using it as the foundation for something new. It is a city built on the belief that continuity is a form of progress. We see this in the way a derelict Victorian warehouse becomes a tech hub, or how an ancient market evolves to feed a new generation of immigrants. As you close these pages and perhaps step out into the London air, remember that you are now part of this continuity. Whether you are a lifelong resident or a traveler passing through for a few days, your footsteps have added to the collective weight of the city's story. The multitudes that London contains now include you. The sun sets over the Waterloo sunset, the last post echoes through the stone corridors of the tower, and the night buses begin their long, lonely circuits. The city does not sleep, it merely changes its tempo. It remains a city of thresholds, a place where the past is always just a shoulder shrug away, and the future is being forged in 1,000 different languages in 1,000 different kitchens. London is not a destination to be reached, it is an experience to be lived. It is a city that demands your curiosity and rewards your persistence. It is, and perhaps always will be, the extraordinary, contradictory, magnificent capital of the world, a city that remembers everything and yet is always just beginning. The keys turn in the lock. The gap is minded. The city carries on. Thank you for spending your evening with us. If you found this history helpful, a thumbs up and a subscription are greatly appreciated. We look forward to seeing you in our next deep dive into the evolution of Paris. Until then, we wish you a restful night.